Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Cast to the Future, our fifth episode. My name is Curtis. I am the host of today's show, but I will be not a judge today. I'm actually going to be one of the debaters. The movie we are focusing on today is Jaws, the blockbuster hit. You could practically maybe the first blockbuster hit ever in 1975, directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, and Richard Dreyfuss, and based on a popular novel. This is the movie you can say kick started the career of Steven Spielberg, and it just became an inspiration for not just war films to come after, but for films to come after for many, many years to come. Again, I'm Curtis. I'm going to be one of the debaters today. We got Erik over there, who's one of our judges. We have a newcomer. We got Chelsea as one of our debaters. We got Logan, who is coming back here as a judge. He'll be our declaration judge also throughout the debates. We have another newcomer, George, as another one of our debaters. We got Jessica as one of our judges. And we got Danny as one of our judges. Now, as always, before we start into the debates, we're going to just give a little quick 30-second minute or so, even though we tend to ramble sometimes, but, short as possible opinions on the movie itself. Okay, so I'll go first. Jaws is also one of my favorite movies of all time. It's simply a classic, especially when you delve into the story of how it was made and the troubles that they went through making that movie and how they couldn't get the shark to work. Every little mistake, every little tragedy that happened on that set actually benefited the movie in the long run because they couldn't get the shark to work, so they had to use it for the later scenes, and it was great for building up the suspense for half of the movie. You never see a shark, and then when Roy Scheider is dumping all that blood and fish guts into the water, he's smoking a cigarette, the shark just pops out and scares him. It's a great moment. But this movie was originally meant to be just just a cheesy summer horror movie, and it went more than that because it wasn't just for the scary shark. The characters are great. The characters are well fleshed out, three-dimensional. When you look at Chief Brodie and Quint and Hopper, they're all relatable. They're all likable characters, and just hanging on this boat with these three is just so engaging, as even more engaging than watching a shark rip up the boat or eat up some people. So yeah, Jaws is simply a classic. It's truly an inspiration through the genre film. So Chelsea, would you like to give your quick thoughts on Jaws?
Sure. Well, Jaws is it's an awesome movie. I kind of have I guess hate's a strong word, but a love-hate relationship with it, because even though it is a great movie and it's a classic, it did start the movement of murdering many sharks. People got really scared of sharks after this movie, and everybody just went out and, just killed hundreds of thousands of sharks because they were like, they're gonna eat us all. But I mean, as far as just being a movie, it's an awesome movie. As you said, the character development is just wonderful. The actors in it are great, and the effects, I mean, one of the things about Spielberg's films is the effects hold up today. You watch Jurassic Park, same thing. And it's just, you still can get scared of that shark, and the way he films it too, you can still get scared of the scenes and the intensity, and of course the soundtrack. It's like Jack Black says in The Holiday, 2 notes and you got a villain. Dun-dun. That's it. So it's the sound, the soundtrack is great, the film is great, it's stood the test of time, and it's just a great movie all around. It's one of my son's favorite movies, and he's 4, but he loves sharks. We went trick-or-treating 2 years ago, and he was a great white shark. He wanted to be a shark, and somebody saw him and said, look, a shark like in Jaws, and he started going da-dun, da-dun. So it's definitely one of those movies that everybody can love and everybody can appreciate.
Danny?
Oh, what to say about Jaws? It is honestly kind of a perfect movie. Like, it's filmmaking at the highest precision, highest of its art form. Uh, every actor in the movie's incredibly cast, especially since they weren't the biggest stars. Like, they were these kind of odd choices too. And I was listening to something talking about all the people they talked to and all the people they could have gone with, but it seems like they just made the right choices. And I mean, it's kind of I would say the epitome of that kind of movie making, where it's like every choice that could have sunk it, or could have just made it not work, ended up making it even better. The shark didn't work. And so it's like, cool, we're just not going to show the shark. And you invent the next 50 years of how horror movies are made. Like, it's just an incredible movie made by someone who, even at he was only 27 when he made this, he is just this filmmaking is his gift, his talent. And it really shows off here. And I don't know how anyone could I don't know how people could watch this and just not even enjoy it, or just say it's bad. I was talking to someone a year ago who was like, oh, it's just a Moby Dick knockoff, and it's kind of stupid. And I'm like, how can you think that? It's got Roy Scheider and Richard Dreyfuss and Robert Shaw, and you just get to watch these three dudes hang out for 2 hours. It's got the scene where they're sitting on a boat getting drunk and talking about the Indianapolis sinking. It's incredible, and it's a perfect movie.
All right, Erik.
Well, Jaws, one of my all-time favorites, and also the first movie to genuinely scare me. I would not go near pools. I would not go near an ocean. I was scared of sharks for a long time thanks to that movie. But over time, I began to appreciate it, and then I heard the story of all the horror that went on set because that shark didn't work. But I love what Danny said, especially about you don't see the shark. And recently, I think the movies that do way better are the one you don't see the monster, like an Alien. You never see the alien for most of the movie. You just get a new vision of it. And you're like, where is this thing? What is this thing? Jaws the shark is just unstoppable. And the characters are absolutely amazing. And after a while, I just have fun with it. It's a fun movie. And honestly, I feel like everyone else took my points, especially my favorite, the score, dun, 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 dun. You just don't forget that, especially when you're walking near the ocean and then that song pops in your head and you're like, what do I do now? But
yeah, pretty much Alien is pretty much Jaws in space. But it's pretty good still. How about you, George?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you guys are saying. It's maybe my favorite Spielberg movie, either that or Raiders of the Lost Ark. They're always kind of fighting out for number one. But it's crazy how good the movie turned out because, like you said, all the drama behind the scenes. And I was just watching this documentary about, not only did the shark not work, but they're going way over budget. And, they shot most of the land stuff first and then delayed the shooting stuff on the ocean. And Spielberg insisted on shooting it on the ocean, which caused a lot of problems, but that also kind of adds to the movie. It makes it seem more real. And it's crazy how it's considered a blockbuster because nowadays blockbusters are kind of considered bad movies, and Jaws is such a great movie. It's the writing's great and the acting's great. I feel like you don't get a lot of great acting in a lot of popcorn movies all the time. And you watch the Jaws sequels, and it makes you realize how good Jaws just really is because, see, what Jaws led to is shittier ripoffs of Jaws. But yeah, it's also just a movie that I can watch over and over and over again. My family gets tired of watching it on the 4th of July, but I always insist that we watch it. And my sister just always looks at me like, yeah, this is good, I guess, but why do we keep watching this? So it's just nice to see other people that love Jaws as much as I do. So glad I'm with you guys.
It does kind of make a good 4th of July movie. How about you, Jessica?
So I was part of probably the majority of people who watched this just because I was so young when I saw it for the first time. I remember my cousin and I would always hide behind the couch anytime it seemed like the shark was coming. to me, Steven Spielberg can do no wrong. I love him so much, and the behind the scenes stories I always find for this one are much more inspiring for people who want to be filmmakers, people who might be struggling to kind of get started, because when everything was going wrong, like Steven Spielberg was sure, like, this is the end of my career before I even get started. And it's also kind of like a great example of like, everything happens for a reason, because yeah, all these things were going wrong, but it made the movie so much better and so much more suspenseful. And we just had not seen anything like it. And it really kind of cultivated the idea of anything that we can imagine is always going to be scarier and more horrifying than anything they can show you. And it's a great overall movie. It's fun. No matter how many times you see it, it can still kind of get you. It can still kind of make you feel nervous or scared while you're watching it. So I enjoy it a lot.
And finally, Logan.
Well, this is where it's kind of interesting. I'm coming in from a bit of a different perspective than a lot of folks, because I know that this movie terrified my sister when she was a kid, which means that I didn't see it as a kid. It was one of those, it was not allowed in my house because my sister had control with that. That's also why, she didn't see E.T. And as far as I know, she still has not seen E.T. I have. Anyway, but when it comes to Jaws, I saw it much later on in life, which I feel helped. I was able to kind of appreciate more of the cool cinema techniques behind it, and just I think kind of what Danny said earlier, we all know that Spielberg is this stellar director. We all know that he's got this massive talent to it. What makes something like Jaws really fun is that it is pure unadulterated Spielberg. It is so early in his career that like the biggest thing he had done at that point was about some dudes fighting a semi-truck driver, like with the movie Duel. Like he hadn't done a lot at that point. So this is him just like getting to go as hog crazy as he wants to and make this really scary, intimidating movie. And it is kind of that perfect confluence of events. There are certain shots that work, and the fact that like the animatronic shark didn't, it lends to that air of mystery and dread that kind of permeates into the thing. But also what I really enjoy about Jaws is that for as thrilling and heart-pounding as it is, it's also a really good slow burn. Like it takes its time. It is very methodical in how it lays out its beats. Like when we see Scheider at the beach and he's worried about a kid in the long waves, like we feel every moment as that passes, because the tension is just slowly ratcheting up because Spielberg knows what he's doing. So yeah, it's a stellar movie, and I can't wait to see the different ideas that kind of come about with putting a new version together.
All right. But as with always with Cast of the Future, we're going to pretend that Jaws never existed. He never was released in 1975. Oh my gosh, the world would be so different. But what if it was made right now in 2020? What actors would be part of it? What director would direct it? Maybe Steven Spielberg would have been a sensation even without Jaws. Who knows? Maybe he still exists. But let's say a different director took on this movie. So let's not waste any time. Let's go ahead and cast the future. Logan, since you're the declaration judge, go ahead and take over.
All right. Well, debaters, we are starting off with Ellen Brody, wife of title character Martin Brody. She was played by Lorraine Gary in the original film. And in the original movie, she's very much a supportive character for Martin, although we do get to see her stretch her legs a little bit more as we would head into Jaws 2. Whether or not we're still leading into that continuity, we'll see how this 2020 version goes. But, well, Curtis, why don't you start off and give us your first opinion?
All right. So my first pick for Ellen Brody is the actress Vanessa Hudgens, who a lot of you may know from, of course, High School Musical and TV show Powerless and Spring Breakers and stuff like that. The reason why I chose Vanessa Hudgens is because you watch the original Jaws, Ellen Brody is kind of a playful character. She's like Logan said, kind of emotional support to Martin Brody, and depending on how this goes on, like if my Ellen was picked and my Martin was picked, my idea was to go for a much younger type of couple, because even though there is age to Roy Scheider and the actress play Ellen Brody, they have this kind of spunkiness in their romance, in their chemistry, and being husband and wife. Like, you know, of course, you know, Jaws, of course, was a PG movie, but this is 1975 PG. And in the beginning of the movie, when we see Martin, Ellen Brody as Martin is getting out of the bed in the morning, like the way that they're talking to each other, you know, things happened the other night. So I think Vanessa Hudgens is that perfect actress who could be part of that spunky kind of that young and full of romance relationship and be a fitting wife to be an anchor for Martin Brody. So my pick is Vanessa Hudgens.
All right, Chelsea, who's your pick for?
My pick for Ellen is Radha Mitchell. She was the main character other than Vin Diesel in Pitch Black. That's where probably a lot of people know her. And she was also most recently in The Darkness. She was Kevin Bacon's wife, and she was also Johnny Depp's wife in Finding Neverland, the movie about J.M. Barrie. So she can do, you know, lead. She can do supporting. She has a very youthful yet seasoned look about her. She can pull off, you know, any kind of in between 30s and 40s. And I really liked her. Not only do I really like her as an actress, she's very versatile, and she can be a supporting actress, but be full. Like, she doesn't seem like a supporting actress. You remember she was in that movie. You remember that her character was a strong character. And I also considered, like what you had mentioned about Jaws 2, if we did go that route, like if this Jaws, our 2020 Jaws, was you know, successful and they did do it, she would be able to carry a film as Ellen Brody. She would be able to carry it all on her own, and I can totally see her being that strong character. You know, like I distinctly remember when she kills the other shark, you know, and she calls it a son of a bitch, and she's so mad because, you know, and so I just totally can picture her in that role, and I can picture her in the first role, and I can picture her in that role, and she's just a very, like I said, she's a very talented actress, and that's why I picked her.
All right, and George, who is your pick for Ellen Brody?
All right, so as you might have seen, I went a different route. I have a male Ellen Brody, so it's Alan Brody. Hold your applause. And it's Bill Pullman. I love Bill Pullman. He was actually in Lake Placid. This is kind of my throw out to Lake Placid. He kind of plays a Chief Brody type in Lake Placid. So that'd be kind of cool if he's kind of like the husband of Chief Brody, who would be a female in this case. And I was thinking they'd both be police, and that he kind of retired and she became chief. So now he's kind of like retired and staying at home. And I'm thinking their kids are like older now, maybe like in college. So, you know, it'd be more like them just spending time together and less with the kids. And as you guys mentioned, if they do a sequel, then you could have, you know, Bill Pullman taking on the shark. Jaws 4, which is obviously the best one, that's where Ellen Brody really takes on the shark. So we could have Bill Pullman hanging out with Michael Caine and stuff. And yeah, I just love Bill Pullman. I had a college professor who's like his neighbor, so he'd always tell me Bill Pullman stories. It just made me love Bill Pullman even more. So yeah.
All right. Well, debaters, hash it out.
Well, I don't know how much I could say much about Rhonda Mitchell because I didn't see her a lot much. But I think what's important about Ellen's character is how really full of energy she is, how spunky she is, how supportive she is, and you know, I just especially with someone like Bill Pullman, which by the way, with the rules of the like how with the script is that it would be pretty much the same script. So with the kids, even though this shouldn't be part of the argument, is like the kids would probably be still kids in this version, not college age kids, but with Bill Pullman, I don't really see him as, you know, someone with that a lot of energy. I mean, he's getting up there with age, and I think with Vanessa Hudgens, I think especially if you want to do equals, especially want to continue with that continuity, you could still use her. Even by the end, if you go to the ridiculous plot of Jaws 4, even if you go up till there, I think it would be believable as someone like her to finish off the same shark, fourth shark, whatever, instead of someone like Bill Pullman, because to be fair, his time is kind of gone, you know. And I just think Vanessa Hudgens has a little bit more years in her, more stamina in her to continue on with this franchise if she wants to. Anybody else have an argument?
I just I agree with you on the Bill Pullman thing. I think that he would have been a great choice for either role, you know, whether you switch it or if you make him the chief. But I agree with you that he is getting up there. He's still a great actor, and I still find him handsome. But yeah, as far as going multiple movies and having that stamina, and I mean, even, you know, watching the original, and even with Radha Mitchell, if you have like a 10, 12-year-old kid, you have to, like, nowadays, you look at that and you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. You know, she's like 38, you know, or even 40. She's got a 10-year-old kid. That makes sense. Back then, it always struck me as like, wow, they look a little old. You know, because back then, people were having kids younger. So it always struck me as odd. But I did, as far as Vanessa Hudgens, personally, I feel that she's a little young. I know that she is a little older, but she looks very young still. And I personally wouldn't be able to see her, like, I would picture her as more of like a new mom, like she would have some babies. And so
I mean, kids are pretty young in the movie. They're like,
yeah, I mean,
they're like 6, 4 years old. So I can see, I can see some of her 6 or 4-year-olds. Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I could see her as a mom of a 6-year-old. Maybe, I guess, if it was very young. She had him young. And like I said, I know she's probably, what is she, like 30?
Yeah, she's like 32. Yeah.
Yeah, she just still looks young. So, but yeah, I mean, that would be my only, and I guess, like what you said with Rhonda Mitchell, I haven't seen a lot of stuff with her in it with Vanessa Hudgens, so I can't go too much into it. All I can say is the youth thing kind of strikes me as it would be hard for me to comprehend her in that role. But yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I'll step in and defend Bill Pullman if you guys want. Well, like what Curtis was saying, that Ellen Brody is kind of very like supportive and kind of like his emotional support. So I feel like Bill Pullman, that's another reason I wanted him to kind of be like retired, because he is older than her. So he would be a little older than Chief Brodie. So he's kind of this, you know, stay-at-home dad / retired dad now. I just think he has that emotional support. I wish I had a Bill Pullman in my life. Emotionally support me. All right. Sorry, guys. We can move on.
I just think with Bill Pullman, I just think if he was younger, if it wasn't in his Spaceball, even in his Independence Day days, I could see him playing this type of role. It's just, even as someone who's a retiree character, if you're trying to sell this movie to especially when trying to sell this movie to a modern day audience, this type of movie, like Jaws back in the day, was pretty much like an independent film. Even though it was distributed by Universal and that's like a big name studio, it was pretty much, you know, shot and, you know, marketed like like an independent movie. This would be probably an independent movie if this came out today. Like somebody like Anna Purna or an A24 would have brought it out. And the majority of people, the type of audiences that go to see those type of movies are pretty much like millennials or older Gen Z kids, and I don't think a lot of them. I mean, we know who Bill Pullman is because we see him like Independence Day and Spaceballs, but like the younger generation like are not like who's this guy? It's like if they look at the cast list, it's not gonna. I don't think it will entice them to see the movie because this is a guy from their parents' generation. I think of someone like Vanessa Hudgens, especially seeing that how she was in things like, say what you want about High School Musical, but like a lot of younger kids know what High School Musical is, and even stuff like Spring Breakers, and even she was in that huge ensemble movie about dogs called Dog Days. I think a lot of younger audiences will more grasp to her being in the movie, to her being cast and on that cast list. Mm-hmm. And I think that's my argument for now.
All right. Seems like those are the last points folks are making. That was a good round, everybody. So we'll start off right at the top. Curtis, I think you made a really good argument on your various points for Vanessa Hudgens. The fact that she has, got that playful, youthful energy that kind of goes along with the character. She's also well known by people, so that can kind of help. Chelsea, I like the point that you made about Radha Mitchell and how she consistently does play the wife-like character, and she always leaves an impression in the movies that she's in. And George, I liked the rationale for Bill Pullman. Like, aside from just it's Bill Pullman, like the Lake Placid throwback, I think is a good, like, that's a great referential kind of throwback bit of casting. But when it came to the arguments for the various people, I think the person who made the best argument was Curtis. Like when it came to Radha, I wanted to hear more arguments about her. Like really the only points you made in her favor were in your initial statements. But yeah, like I think the argument Curtis made for why Vanessa would be a really good fit to me made sense. So if I had to put in a vote, I would say it would be for Curtis's choice for Vanessa Hudgens for Ellen. So Erik, how about you?
I definitely loved all of your points. I love Radha Mitchell. I was like, please mention Finding Neverland. It's like one of my all-time favorite movies. That is definitely a role I would definitely associate her with the Ellen character. I'm a diehard Bill Pullman fan. I will definitely admit it, but I feel like right now, I feel like he could have played that character when he was President Whitmore around the 90s, maybe. And he's still my president no matter what. And for Curtis, Vanessa Hutchins, yeah, I watched High School Musical. I admit it. I love that movie so much. But she has really grown as an actress. And I love a lot of the points that you made, how she could play a mother. And I feel like growing, yeah, really, Pullman 2020. And as she lately, I think it was even after Bad Boys for Life, I was like, she just keeps like changing it up. And I really think she could bring that spunk to the character that was brought in the 70s, but from the script that we're given. So it would be a new look at the character, but with that same script, I think Vanessa Hutchins, in my opinion, was the best choice. So Curtis, yes, you win.
All right then. Judge Jess, how about you?
Everybody had really good choices. Like they're all incredibly talented actors in their own right. I kind of going off each of the choices, like Erik, I love Bill Pullman. I think he would have been a great choice, and I liked the idea that you were gender flipping them, especially since it is 2020. Like that's not to say that like women would have to stay at home with the baby, so I kind of like that you were bringing that up. But I think the main concern, fact with age and seeing like kind of like the longevity of something like this, it's kind of hard to see it being Bill Pullman as of right now in his career. So for me, it was between Radha and Vanessa. With Radha, I really wish that Chelsea had brought up the fact that she was in Silent Hill, because I feel like that would have been a great opportunity to show that she not only can do horror, but also action sequences, and she's really capable and she's able to kind of survive with that. I mean, for me, like, I felt like Radha checked a lot of boxes, but like just the fact that like we have to kind of base it on with how the series goes, we have to kind of base it on the arguments for your cast. Curtis, I just felt like had a better argument for Vanessa. I saw Vanessa Hudgins and I was just like, really? Vanessa Hudgens? Okay, we'll see what you have to say about her. But like you brought up really good points of how like yes, we tend to always think of High School Musical, but she's also gone on to do a variety of different things. She's done action movies, she's done indie movies. Like she's trying to build her brand as an actress that, with the arguments that Curtis brought, I do believe that she could actually fulfill the role. It was really tough, but I just think that Curtis kind of came out on top with his argument. So I'm going to also go with Vanessa Hudgens.
All right. And last but not least, Judge Danny, what do you got?
All right. All good choices. I really like the Bill Pullman. That's some galaxy brain level thinking. And also because like that's kind of what Bill Pullman was relegated to, was the male equivalent of the supportive wife. If like we look at his role in Sleepless in Seattle and I don't know, a couple of the rom-coms he did in the 90s, he was just that guy. But he is in kind of grandpa territory is the thing. Like I think the last time I really saw him in anything was 1600 Penn. If anyone remembers that show when that happened with Josh Gad. And yeah, he's gray in the hair and he's getting up there. And yeah, I do think like I see your pitch and like it's a good pitch, but it is changing a lot to make it work. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry to be the next one, but yeah, it does come down to Radha or Vanessa, and they're both really good choices. I'm not really familiar with Rhonda Mitchell, I saw Melinda, and I saw Finding Neverland, but years and years ago, and I don't remember her in them. So I don't have much of a history with her, but that actually I kind of like. I like the anonymity. That's something I like about when we're talking about all these older movies. Is I sometimes like that the smaller roles are people that's what I know them for. So. And I think you made very good points. She is more the right age. She's someone who seems like she's a mother of two. And I think she does kind of fit the character on the page. Vanessa Hudgens is really interesting, but is a little young. She does skew her a little young. And I gotta say, like, I'm not seeing this new version of Jaws because of who's playing Chief Brodie's wife. So you could cast, anyone in this role is the thing. So you know what? I'll just go with Rhonda Mitchell. It seems like an interesting choice. Give it to a nice character actress. Give her a little bit of career longevity.
All right, then. Well, if we are going off of the votes, it is 3 in favor of Vanessa Hudgens. So for Jaws 2020, Vanessa Hudgens is our new Ellen Brody. All right. So now as we move into the next round, we get to arguably the actual villain of the picture, Mayor Larry Vaughn, played in the original film by actor Murray Hamilton. This is the gentleman who, well, despite seeing all the evidence that there are consistent shark attacks in Amityville, just can't keep that beach closed. Was born and raised on Amity Island, where eventually becomes a mayor and just kind of stays there for the rest of his life. So we're looking for someone who feels like that good career politician who just can't stop making those wrong choices for the wrong reasons. So, Curtis, take us away.
All right, so my choice for Mayor Vaughn is Jon Favreau. I think Jon Favreau just has that look, because if you think about Mayor Vaughn, he looks like just like an everyday type of guy who's been living on this island since childhood, and Jon Favreau has like an everyman type of look. And I base this off Office performances as Happy Hogan in the MCU. Happy Hogan is always this like self-conscious, this like nervous perfectionist type of guy who wants things to just go right and doesn't want just like running after Tony Stark everywhere and following him, make sure he doesn't get into trouble. And like even in the Spider-Man films, he's looking after Peter Parker. He's typically this kid's babysitter, and he just wants to keep things in control. And I think that's what Mayor Vaughn is. I can see Jon Favreau in those argument scenes with Martin Brody, why he thinks that he should keep close. Like, look, the citizens want the beaches open. This is 4th of July weekend. This is when we get our most income. Please don't make this a big deal. Like, I can see Jon Favreau in those scenes easily. So my pick, Jon Favreau.
All right. Chelsea, who's your pick?
My pick for the mayor was originally Bill Fichtner, but I changed it to John Carroll Lynch. He most recently, you guys have probably seen him in American Horror Story. He was the clown in the Freak Show series, and in this last one, I can't remember, but I'm like totally drawing a blank. But he's been in tons of stuff, and one of the roles that I really remember him in was Gothica. And in Gothica, he was the guy that worked with Halle Berry's husband, and when they were doing the child pornography ring and all that stuff and raping inmates and everything. And he has a way of pulling off either character. Like even in American Horror Story, he was that psycho clown, but then by the end, you really wanted him to just be happy, because you realize he was just this misunderstood guy, and he was just going around killing people because he just wanted to make children happy, but people didn't like him because they thought he was a freak, and so they disfigured him. And it was like the other way around in Gothica, where he seems like such a nice guy and such a strong professional, protector even. And then it turned out that he was just doing all these horrible things. And so the reason I like him for the role is not only is he just a big, strong actor, so you can really see him as like the mayor and I'm watching over this town and I've lived here my whole life and all that stuff, but also just because he is so distinctively like ever changing. He could be like, oh no, I'm just doing it because I want to protect my town and I'm going to be a good citizen and everything. And then, he just turns to, like the chief, and he's like, don't mess this up, and you can see how he could change from this happy, personable, like friendly guy who kisses babies, and then just all of a sudden is like, I'm not doing anything to ruin my town. And even if there's something in there, like I know that Curtis said we were going with the original script, but even if they change something slight, like how nowadays everybody's building stuff, so if he were to be like, I'm getting this contract coming in, and they're building some new, like a new mall or something, and I don't want anything to damage that. Like, I just really think that Carroll Lynch would do really well in that role because of that diversity and just because of his presence. He has a very commanding presence, but he also, like I said, same with Radha Mitchell, can be in the background. So even though he can be this huge actor and have such a demanding presence, when he's in a movie, he can be that background guy and he can be a supporting guy and you still remember him. And I mean, like I said, with Gothica, he still scares me. When I see him in another movie, I think of him in that movie and I'm like, oh, that guy. So he has a very memorable way of the way he performs things, and he can be very emotional and just seem like a nice guy, but with a slightly, vindictive side. And that's why I really liked just him for the role.
All right. And George, who's your choice?
Alrighty, so my choice for Mayor Larry Vaughn is Mr. Samuel L. Jackson, who's older than Bill Pullman, so I'm worried. But I love Sam Jackson, and I think that he's just great at playing villains that you like. And I think that I was talking to my roommate about this. Even though the mayor is obviously a a jerk. There's something about him that's still maybe not likable, but there's that scene where Chief Brodie finally gets him to sign the thing, and you can tell that the mayor realizes that he's screwed up and that he's an idiot, that he was wrong all along. So I think Sam Jackson can play that. And I think also Sam Jackson is very charming, obviously, and he could come across as this politician who everybody loves, and they're going to listen to him when he's telling them to do the wrong thing. Like, don't worry about it. Everything's fine. We're all safe. The beaches are open. And obviously, if we made this movie today, you keep seeing the memes about the pandemic and how this feels like we're living Jaws and that everybody's still going to the beach. So I feel like Sam Jackson would be good at playing that kind of politician that, is very charming, but, is kind of lying to us and telling us to do the wrong thing. Yeah, that's why I want Sam Jackson.
All right. Well, debaters, make your arguments.
Okay, so these choices are pretty cool choices. I'll say that at first. Now, my arguments against these actors are almost like complete opposites. With John Carroll Lynch, I think like on paper and like looking at him, it's almost like a really good choice. The only thing about John Carroll Lynch, I think he's a little bit too intimidating. I'll get back to that a little later. And with Samuel L. Jackson, he's too likable. He's too charming to play this type of character. Because with John Carroll Lynch, you gotta understand with this mayor character. This mayor from the original movie, he's just this pudgy everyman. This is a guy that, if it weren't for politics, it weren't his position, Brodie or Hooper would have punched him in the face in a heartbeat. And it's his political position is what gets in the way, because if Brodie were to punch the mayor, he would get booted off the sheriff force or get arrested. This is a guy you want to hate. This is a guy you want to sock in the face so much. With John Carroll Lynch, I think he's too intimidating to play that pudgy guy. With John Carroll Lynch, you can say, "Oh yeah, I could believe this guy is a competent mayor." And with John Favreau, he's the type of guy like I could see him as this kind of this Chris Christie type of guy, this pudgy, like very right-winged, conservative politician. He's just in it for the money, for the votes. Because if I open these beaches up, and even with the shark problem, and if I make everyone's 4th of July great, I'll get reelected. He has that type of mentality. With Samuel L. Jackson, even if he's a bad politician, he's that type of that guy that people will still love anyway, because of his charm, because of his charisma, because of his speech, because of the way he talks. No one wants to see Samuel L. Jackson as Samuel L. Jackson has played unlikable characters in the past, but even as hard as they try to make Sam Jackson unlikable, he still comes out as likable. You still love him, and you don't want to love this character. You want to hate him. But I'll let my other two debaters try to say what you need to say.
It's funny that you said that about how Samuel L. Jackson is too likable, because that's how I feel about Jon Favreau. Like, he's just such a nice, happy-looking guy. Like, when you see him, it's just like, even when he was happy in the Avengers, and even when it seemed like he was being a jerk to Peter Parker, and he still just, you could tell that it was like he was a big softie. And every movie that I've seen him in, and then I also think of him as the director of Elf, and that's just one of the greatest movies. So
that's why he's so good, because he does look so soft. He does look so the pudgy guy.
But he's likable. He's not. I wouldn't hate Jon Favreau. Whereas what you said about Samuel L. Jackson, I hated Samuel L. Jackson, and I love Samuel L. Jackson. I hated him in Skull Island, where he was like,
he still came out as like kind of a badass though. Like, he's still kind of.
But it was still like, you were like, what is wrong with you? Like, he could not get it through his head. He was so stubborn, and that, I mean, that's kind of what the mayor is. He was so stubborn in that movie that he was just like, I will not bend on this. I'm gonna kill this thing. And it was like, okay. And no matter how much anybody argued with him, he took it upon himself to even threaten civilians just so that he could kill Kong. And in that movie, I really did not like him. So for me, if it was between those two, like just that, I really find Samuel L. Jackson to be he can be less likable than Jon Favreau. Jon Favreau just seems way too nice. Whereas with Carroll Lynch, that's why I liked him, because he can be both. He can be that really nice, like, guy who goes out and I'm just looking for my town and I'm just trying to, you know, take care of everybody and be a good mayor. And all I want is to get reelected. But he has that dark side, and you can see it in him when he portrays it. It's just like all of a sudden he'll be like, you know, I gotta get reelected, or I gotta get this beach open no matter what it takes, you know. And you can like him while hating him, and that's why I really liked him, because you can get both. Whereas I think that with the others, it's either one or the other. I mean, Samuel L. Jackson, you can like and hate at the same time as well, but I feel that I also feel like he's a bit too big for the role. I think Samuel L. Jackson in the role of the mayor would kind of command the movie. And it's not a commanding role. It's not the role. It's the role you remember, and it's a role that you don't like. Like, you don't like that guy, but you don't really like walk away like, damn, that mayor, that was the best character in the movie. Whereas Samuel L. Jackson is usually one of the best characters in the movie. So that's, I wouldn't lean that way. And then, like I said, Jon Favreau, he just seems way too nice.
Yeah, I agree with Chelsea that I think Jon Favreau is too nice. And I have to say, with John Carroll Lynch, I'm not super familiar with his work. The stuff you mentioned, it sounds like he's evil. And I think he was in Zodiac, right? And he's supposed to be like evil in Zodiac. Yeah. But I remember him as, like Drew Carey's brother on the Drew Carey show. And I think he was like a transvestite, and he was like, you know, a nice guy. And then Fargo, he plays Frances McDormand's husband, a Bill Pullman type. And I just see him as a nice guy also. And again, like, maybe I'm the only one, but I don't like the mayor in Jaws, but I do feel like he's someone who seems like someone who realizes eventually that he got all these people killed and that he feels bad, and he's still a human being. And I feel like Sam Jackson is someone that could, you know, have that charm, but then you also see that he could act that he's screwed up, and that he's still someone that you kind of feel bad for, even though he's the villain.
Go back to John Carroll Lynch. Because I'll say this, because the past week we just did a table read for Crazy Stupid Love, and I just watched Crazy Stupid Love like officially for the first time, and he's a character in that movie. He's pretty funny in the movie. If he's that type of character in Jaws, I could probably see it. But I think most people, even though a lot of people seen Crazy Stupid Love, most people have known him for American Horror Story. And it goes back to my argument, is that I just think he just comes off as a bit too intimidating. People could see him as more, he's that intimidating that he can be looked at as, okay, this is sort of a responsible looking politician. Back to, you know, Samuel L. Jackson, like, even if he's playing villainous roles, even if he's playing unlikable roles, even if he's playing like one of the most like despicable characters in something like Django Unchained, people still like him in that role. For some people, just still grab on to Samuel L. Jackson. Like, no matter how evil, how vile you want to try to make his character be, people still love him. And with this mayor character, you don't want to love him. You want to hate him. And I know Jon Favreau sometimes could come off as likable and huggable, like a big teddy bear. But I think, you know, especially with how the way Jon Favreau uses his speech patterns and uses his delivery, I think he could use that as an advantage to make him seem really unlikable, seem like a guy you want to punch in the face, like a guy you just can't, this politician, this right-wing politician, this guy who just cares about the business. You can see him as a guy who just gets into your nerves, gets into your skin. And I think, you know, that would be my last argument on that.
I just wanted to throw in like what George was saying about that, you know, at the end when the mayor realizes, well, near the end, you know, when he signs the thing and he sends them out and tells them, you know, like, he realizes that he got those kids killed, you know, he got so many people killed because he didn't do it. And to me, the mayor was somebody you didn't like at the beginning, and then by the end, you just really felt bad for him because he was just doing his job and just trying to keep the town together and just trying to keep funds in and the visitors happy. And so even though, like, I hate watching kids die in movies now that I'm a mom, especially boys. And like, that's like all that dies in that movie is terrible. But I still don't hate the mayor. And I think that's why I like Carroll Lynch, because in the things like American Horror Story, you do hate him at the beginning. You think he's a terrible, the 1984 was the most recent one. He was the Bojangles or whatever. He was the guy that cut off people's ears, except for he didn't. And sorry if anybody hasn't seen it. But he, same thing, like with Twisty the Clown, he was really like intimidating and you didn't like him at the beginning. And then toward the end of the season, toward the end of the movie, you realize he was totally misunderstood, or he was doing something that he didn't realize what he was doing, and he didn't mean to hurt people. It just, that's the way it ended up, and he feels bad about it. And that's how it was in American Horror Story, and that's how it was in Jaws. And just him, I really can picture him in that role because he can do that so well, where he changes from this guy that you're just like, oh God, he's like creepy and intimidating, and what is wrong with him? Why doesn't he care? And then he does care. He was totally misunderstood, and now he can still pull off that big teddy bear look too while being intimidating. And near the end, when you realize that, it's just like, oh well, all right, well, I guess that guy's not too bad. So that's my thing for Lynch.
All right, that was a fantastic round, everybody. Very good points from everybody. I'll start off at the top. Curtis, I really liked your argument with Jon Favreau. The fact that he always brings that kind of, I'm the everyman. I could help you with this thing, and then I could go out for a beer with you. And like he definitely has that attitude for him that feels like a guy who's been the mayor of Amity Island his whole life would probably have to have. Also, like, I like that you brought up that he looks like the kind of guy where he could be rude enough where you'd want to punch him in the face, but his political standing would stop you from doing it. I like Favreau definitely kind of brings that attitude to it. Chelsea, I like the pick of John Carroll Lynch. He's one of those like, bit part actors who like is just underappreciated, and has kind of, I like that you bring up that he is this kind of big, intimidating physical presence, but depending on the role, he can be more quiet and soft-spoken and kind of be this weird dichotomy of ideologies when you're presenting him on screen. And George, I really liked a lot of your points with Sam Jackson. A lot of the points where it's just like he's good at playing villains that you can't help but like. And it's like, yeah, like that is a big recurring thing for Sam, even when he's playing villains and stuff like Kingsman, where it's like you still like, you're like, okay, but like you still kind of, you're oddly rooting for him, even though he's doing terrible, terrible things. But honestly, I think what really sold me with the argument was actually the last one that you made, Chelsea. The fact that John Carroll Lynch can come across as misunderstood. Because at the very beginning, like, you were kind of hammering into, he's big, scary, big psycho, like, and kind of with those roles. But then the fact that there is that transition in his roles where he goes from, I seem really scary, but, I just wasn't understanding the situation, and because of that, I have accidentally done the wrong thing. And I think that'd be a really beautiful kind of realization moment that I think John Carroll Lynch could do a very good job at. So based on the argument, I'd have to put my vote behind John Carroll Lynch as the mayor. All right. Jess, how about you?
This is really hard because I love all three of these choices so much for their own reason. They're all incredible performers. George, I really liked your pick of Sam Jackson just because, he has that long career. I could believe him as a likable villain. The problem that I had with him is that especially when he's a villain, it's kind of hard to see a transition from very intimidating to a little softer and a little bit more understanding. So that's why and Chelsea brought up a good point of, I feel like this might be a role that he might be just a bit too big for. So as much as I love him, I unfortunately couldn't pick him. So for me, it was between John and John. And it was hard because Curtis and Chelsea both made really great last-second arguments when they were ending. With Jon Favreau, I was having a hard time kind of believing him as a villain, because even like if you see him in like, you know, Iron Man or Spider-Man, like he's one of those ones of like he just seems grumpy, but he never passes that line of being unlikable or like a villain. But Curtis, you made a really good point of like all he has to do is change like his cadence or his tempo of voice, and it completely shifts that character. And I could see him doing that. I agreed with that. So I was leaning towards Jon Favreau, but kind of like Logan, Chelsea's last argument with comparing John Carroll Lynch's performances in those 2 seasons of American Horror Story, where he starts off as one character, you hate him, and then a turning point happens, and then you have sympathy for him, and now you're rooting for him, and now you're wanting to see him succeed. So it was really, really hard to pick between the two, because you both had really good last standing arguments. For me, what ultimately came down to it, when Logan described the character as being born and raised in this town and wanting it, I feel like I could believe it more with John Carroll Lynch, just because he looks a bit older than Jon Favreau. So I could believe that it seems like he has more of a dog in the race, and why he wants to really be reelected, because he's been there for a longer period of time. So I'm going with Chelsea's choice.
All right. Danny, what's your choice?
All really good choices. I do have to agree, Sam Jackson's a little too big for the role. And both in the sense of his stardom and in the sense of just he's a performative actor. He likes to go big. And I feel like, yeah, he takes this role and he kind of, I think, would want to chew a little bit of the scenery and be like a villain, as opposed to a guy who's just kind of like it's interesting about this, how this character in the book it's based on is like in debt to the mob, and that's partly why he wants to keep it open. So like I think Favreau and Lynch can play that a little more of like, and I don't know if that would make it into our version of this movie, but as someone who's like could be bullied and pushed around a bit, and it's kind of, and with Sam, it's kind of like what we talked about in Back to the Future, where like with the principal, where it's like you can't cast too big a name, because then like you have to give them a few more scenes and make them a whole arc and a character. Where Favreau and John Carroll Lynch are kind of actors who come in and can be these kind of character parts and just show up when the script needs them to. It's tough because you made good arguments. Curtis, you drew the analogy to, you drew the comparisons to Spider-Man Homecoming and Far From Home. And like that's actually interesting because I do kind of see that vibe for this version of the mayor, or like if how Favreau would play it, as it's not like he's the bad guy, he's got other stuff on his plate, he's got these choices to make. Like, we don't think of him as a bad guy in Homecoming, but he does kind of ignore Peter the whole time. He's somewhat antagonistic to him, and I could see him being played that way. And John Carroll Lynch, it's interesting, Chelsea, you didn't bring up Crazy Stupid Love or Zodiac, which are like, well, Zodiac is like, I don't know, for me, like what he's like most famous for. And Crazy Stupid Love is an interesting thing of like how he can play this kind of soft dad, but then who gets tough when he finds out the twist in that movie. I'm going to go with Carroll Lynch, though, because he does seem like the kind of guy I think your argument at the end, Chelsea, was what sold it over just the inch over Favreau was he's a guy who seems like he would do something and not realize it's the wrong thing. He would have to come to that realization later. So, John Carroll Lynch.
All right. And Erik, who's your vote?
All of you made amazing points. All three actors, honestly, are perfect actors that could play this part. George, I love all your points about Samuel L. Jackson. I think he'd be a really cool mayor. I do agree with the other judges. I think he's a little too big for the part. And also, I feel like if he was looking at the cast list, he'd be like, oh, I'm mayor. And then you look and see this Quint character, be like, maybe that's more in my wheelhouse. I think he'd have a lot more fun chewing scenery as Quint. So honestly, I mean, we could cast him, but I don't know if he'd even accept the role. He's like, I think Quint he'd have a lot more fun with. And Curtis, I love all your points about Jon Favreau. I wish you mentioned I Love You, Man, because I think that would have been the movie where I would have been like, I actually might have been able to picture him as like, I have so many curse words I can think of to describe his character in that movie. But as a very mean person in the beginning, and then like the very end, his wife tells him something and then he turns into the softie. So I think like that character arc would have done it for me. But everything else I've seen him in that you mentioned, I'm like, yeah, I just think he's a little too likable. But John Carroll Lynch, Chelsea, I love all your points about him. And another role I thought would have been perfect for him, thinking about it, was his role in Ted 2, where he in a way played a politician or just a guy that was trying to hide behind the scenes. And then he does run away. But it was your points about American Horror Story. I'm like, yep, you got me, because he's one way in the beginning and he just works his way up and becomes the person we all feel bad for. And that was only in 4 episodes. This could have been a whole season arc. He did it in 4 episodes. I'm like, this guy is so talented, especially in Bubble Boy, where he played a softie the whole movie. I can think of so many movies where I can already picture him as the character, and also in the movie with Michael Keaton, The Founder. So I think he can play a likable person at the end, but also be a bit in kind of the pudgy politician that you don't really like too much, but I think you can level with him. So I got to go with John Carroll Lynch.
All right. Well, then our choice for the new Mayor Vaughn is John Carroll Lynch. All right. Well, now as we move into round 3, we start getting into the main crew of the Orca. In this case, Matt Hooper, played in the original film by Richard Dreyfuss. Now, Hooper is an oceanographer who's kind of helping on the team. He's fascinated by all the sharks that are in these oceans, but, he's not the most stable at sea. He kind of wants to get a better footing at it as the movie goes. So, Curtis, take us away.
So my choice for Matt Hooper is going to be John Boyega. Of course, a lot of you know John Boyega from the new Star Wars sequels as Finn, but he's been in other stuff. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to see Attack the Block yet. I know that's the movie that that kind of kickstarted his career. But I saw him in other things like Detroit. Even as a movie as bad as Pacific Rim Uprising, he still comes across as a solid actor in that movie. With John Boyega, I know it's it's not it's the mainstream thing to look at, but take from his performance as Finn in the Star Wars sequels, I think you bring a lot of Finn into Matt Hooper, because Matt Hooper, he's studying it as an oceanographer, but then he's coming into the situation where it feels like he hardly had any experience with. I mean, I don't remember if they mentioned that he has worked with sharks or anything like that before. And like he studies them, of course, he's an oceanographer, but he's going into some new territory dealing with Bruce, this shark who just has a goal, who just has an ambition to get these guys, no matter what it takes. He's going up against a demon shark overall, So I think seeing John Boyega playing a character who's suddenly getting into that situation, seeing how he's dealing with it and how he tries to deal with it, would be pretty entertaining to see, and it would add so much to his resume, and to see what he could bring as an actor. And in a lot of scenes in Jaws, we get a lot of scenes where Matt has these bigger arguments with Quint, and John Boyega, as we see, like in his scenes in the Star Wars movies, when he's having scenes with Harrison Ford, or when he's having scenes with Poe Dameron, he can do banter pretty well, and Matt Hooper just has a lot of those one-liners, those banter lines that you remember him for, with Richard Dreyfuss playing him. I think John Boyega could deliver that same charm. So my choice is John Boyega.
All right, Chelsea, who's your choice?
Well, my choice for Hooper was Henry Golding. Henry Golding, lately he's been in a lot of rom-coms. He was the main guy in Crazy Rich Asians. He was in Last Holiday, the Christmas film with the girl from Game of Thrones. But also one of my favorite movies that he was in recently was The Gentleman. And he did a great job in that. And it showed that he went from, not just rom-coms, but to that. He was just this bitter, like ruthless but not very bright mob boss, and he was trying to take over, but he didn't quite know what he was doing because he was so young. And that's what made me think of him for Hooper, because Hooper really, he strikes me as like this fresh out of marine biology school, kind of guy. He's really smart, but he's naive. He can come across as a little bit nervous because of that. Like, he really seemed to like not like Quint. He was like, this guy is creeping me out right now. Are you sure you want to put our lives in this guy's hands? And I can picture that with Henry Golding, whereas he can be a strong character, he can also, just kind of seem like that nervous, scholarly, kind of, nerdy type, where he can just, I don't know, he comes across as smart, like I said, smart but naive. And I can totally picture him as also standing up for the shark. He can, be kind of the advocate for, oh, well, we got to study it. And, when he gets in the cage and goes in, even though, he doesn't know, like, he's heard stories, it's this huge shark. And, they're like, you going to go in there with that shark? And he can be strong while being nerdy. So he really just fit the role for me, because I can picture him coming in and to this small town, and like, even at first he might be like, oh, I'm super hot shot, I just graduated, I know all this stuff about oceanography. And then he gets out there and he's got these guys who are like veteran fishermen, veteran chief, they're older, he's young, he's, like I said, he's still a bit naive and wet under the ears. And he comes in and he gets on the boat, he's like, all right, these guys are kind of crazy. He sees the shark, and then he's like, okay, well, I may be in over my head, but I'm not backing down. I'm doing this because I said I was going to, and I put my mind to it. And he, considers it a challenge. So I can really see him in that role, and just portraying all those different emotions, because Hooper really does go through a lot of emotions, and a lot of different types of character. And then as well as the one lines. I mean, you can see in not only his rom-coms, but in The Gentleman, he can hold that supportive / main role, and he can do one-liners, and he can just really come across as charismatic as well. He can be, and that was something Richard Dreyfuss had. He was very charismatic in that he was just, you liked him, even though he seemed like this kind of nerdy, offbeat, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I do because I'm really smart kind of guy. He also came across as just really, nice. So even though he was super smart, it was like, oh, okay, he's a really cool guy. And I think that Henry Golding really could pull that off as well.
All right. And George, who's your pick?
All right, so I chose Michael Pena as Mr. Hooper. I think Michael Pena is just kind of like the perfect sidekick. He's like funny, he's smart. I could see him butting heads with Quint, but also, being a very friendly person, kind of like Chelsea said. I mean, obviously, I think Ant-Man probably comes to mind with like this sidekick thing, but he's just one of those actors. Every time you see him in the movie, he's kind of steals the scene from everybody. I hope he gets more leading roles too, but I feel like as Hooper, he would be just like kind of Richard Dreyfuss was. He's able to be really funny. He's kind of a comedic character, but he's also probably the character that gets like the most angry in the movie as well, because he's like the shark expert and people want listening to him. And I could see him, getting in fights with the mayor, but also being very buddy with Brodie. As I mentioned earlier, I'm making Chief Brodie a woman, so there might also be a little bit of a possible romantic thing with Brodie and Hooper, but obviously she's married, so there wouldn't be anything happening. And I remember from the book that that Hooper and Mrs. Brodie had an affair. So I thought that might be kind of funny if we kind of have a little bit of that going on in this movie, even though it wouldn't really happen. Thank you. So yeah, that's my thought on Michael Pena.
All right, debaters, make your points.
You know, with Michael Pena, even though I would say Michael Pena would be great for his role if he was a little younger, because I think he's like around 40, right? He's like probably like 40 years old, something around there. And it's not just the age; it's just that this is a guy who I think looks like has some experience already. Not to say that personality-wise he'll be good for the role. I just think he would be much better for an older Matt Hooper who's been through this already. Not a guy who's fresh out of school, who's in over his head, who's just getting into the situation. With Henry Golding, I think as much as more as I want to see from Henry Golding, because I think he's a solid performer. I don't think he's great yet, but if he does more, I could see him turning out to be great. Like, for example, I wouldn't mind seeing Henry Golding be the next James Bond. Honestly, I think like just from seeing him in Crazy Rich Asians, like this guy could be James Bond. Like he has that swagger to him, but I think he's too much of a pretty face, if you know what I mean. Because with Matt Hooper, his concern, like, not to say that if Henry Golding played a character, his concern would be more of his looks or more having a playboy type of personality. It's just that when you look at the description of Matt Hooper, who he is on the inside, he doesn't seem that type of character who would have a lot of swagger. I can't see Henry Golding as this socially awkward, nerdy guy. To me, Henry Golding looks more like the cool kid, the cool guy from college. But John Boyega, he could do that delivery. He could be. He's the type of guy who, even though you follow him on social media, you see what he's like in real life. He's a charismatic, charming dude, but he's that type of actor who has that range. He could play those socially awkward characters. And like I said, he nails one-liner. He nails whenever he has to do a one-liner. And Matt Cooper has a bunch of one-liners, a bunch of banter with characters like Quint and Brodie. And and what I like about John Boyega so much is that it's a criticism with most actors, but he does a lot of face acting. But his face acting is really good. When John Boyega knows how to express his face, and I could just see John Boyega on the Orca. I seen the shark coming in and like a close up on his face and how terrified he is. That could be really impactful. And what else do I want to say about him? Oh yeah, if you see Detroit's, like the Detroit, he's playing character way different from playing Finn in Star Wars. But what his experience in Detroit, when he has to be scared, when he has to be terrified, when he has to be tense, his experience from Detroit could really help him do that. But I want to hear more about what Chelsea and George have to say, though.
I was just going to say that, yeah, I think Henry Golding is, it sounds weird to say he's too attractive to play Hooper, but I feel like, kind of like Erik said, where Sam Jackson might make a better Quint, I feel like Henry Golding might make a better Brodie. He just feels more like he might be Brodie, kind of the charming leading man. Like Roy Scheider isn't like, a hunk, but he's a good looking guy. And I feel like Richard Dreyfuss is playing more of like a nerdy kind of scruffy looking guy. And but yeah, I don't see Henry Golding as kind of like the nerdy sidekick. He's too hot. But John Boyega, I think is a good choice, but I think I maybe kind of misunderstood, because I do understand that Michael Pena is older, so he'd be more maybe like a professor who's coming in, like a shark expert coming in to help Brodie, but he's maybe not wet behind the ears like Richard Dreyfuss was in the original. So yeah, I think John Boyega would definitely be a better choice than Henry Golding, but not as good as Michael Pena.
It's funny what both of you said about Henry Golding, what everybody's saying in the comments too. He is attractive. That's one of the reasons why I picked him, because he's attractive, but to me, he's attractive in like an every guy kind of way. You know, he's got like crooked teeth and he's got kind of that like little half cock smile, kind of Harrison Fordy.
His abs are so chiseled though.
He's what?
Abs are so chiseled. It's almost
You
like
don't have to see his abs, you know. I mean, I guess you could, and maybe that would add to it, you know. I mean, my pick for Quint is coming up, and that's, you know, my pitch was going to be hot guys on a boat. No, I mean, it's also funny, George, that you mentioned he has the affair and that you see him as a Brodie, because I had a really hard time picking Henry Golding for Hooper or Brodie. I couldn't decide. And what finally sold it for me was, I mean, besides my pick for Brodie, but also just, I can really picture him in, you know, just put some glasses on him and, you know, scruff up his hair. And I can really picture him in that role. He has done roles where, you know, he is awkward. He was awkward in The Gentleman. You know, he was so naive. He thought he knew what he wanted. And then, you know, when McConaughey comes in, sees him with his wife, he nailed that terrified look. He just nailed it. It was like, I'm gonna die. And he also, the fact that you mentioned that they have an affair, like I said, he would fit that if that was somehow written in, since it's in the book, you know, if they did add that into the script, or even if it was just hinted at. He is a character that could pull that off. He could be naive, young, you know, kind of nervous, but still have that manly swagger enough to get along with the guys on the boat. And that would be kind of that hidden, underneath that nerdy, naive exterior is that manly swagger that enabled him to have an affair with Brodie's wife. And if it's Vanessa Hudgens, I mean, yeah, I can totally see that.
we're working with we're working with the script and the story of the movie, not the story of the book though. But
even if it was like hinted in undertones, just the way the conversation goes,
it's not even hidden. It's not even hidden in undertones in the movie though, and there's no. I mean, Ellen and Hooper meet once at that dinner scene, and that's it. And there's nothing.
There's some sexual tension there though.
There was. See, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There's hidden undertones. There was sexual tension in that scene.
And that was it. That was it. I mean, the focus of this movie is on getting the shark. I mean, if they had a side story about a whole affair and everything, that would just be distracting. I mean,
well, it doesn't even have to be a side story. Just like we said, little hints, and even scripts can be changed. I mean, we're pretending that this movie wasn't made, so we don't have to go exactly by the script. We can, we can go through it and be like, you know what, let's add a little camera angle here, or a little wink here, or something, and because scripts get changed all the time. So
yeah, the Jaws script specifically changed a lot.
Yeah,
a wacky Jaws script.
Also, just while we're talking about the other ones too, I actually like Michael Pena for the role as well. I did like that. I do agree that he does seem a bit older. That would be my only concern, but he is able to pull that off. That, like kind of nervous, friendly guy that's like, hey, I'm gonna, hang out with you guys, and he is a little bit more scruffy looking. So that right there is like, it's yeah, unfortunately, Curtis, with your pick, I don't know him well enough. I've really only seen him in Star Wars. So to me, I can't picture him in that role. And because he looks really young. I mean, we're talking about how you don't want him to be right out of school. I mean, I can't imagine him going through all those biology courses. And
he's 28. He's 28. So realistically, he could come out of med school. He could come out of ocean, whatever, ocean, like marine biology school, whatever. I could see him as a guy, as a kid who just came out of college came out of his
He
study.
doesn't seem like a seasoned guy. Like
I mean, that
Henry
was not
Golding's like
supposed to be
35.
seasoned,
Like
though.
I could
He
see
just came
him
out
as
of
having
school.
some seasons on the ice, maybe being like one of those adventure types. Like that was how I pictured him. Like he's nerdy, but he's an adventure type. He's one of those guys that goes out and searches for air jaws during Shark Week.
I mean, but Matt in the movie, he was like fresh out of school too. He's just this guy, this random marine biologist guy that the town just decided to hire and look into this thing, and he states it like he went to school to study this thing, but he really had no real hands-on experience and stuff like this, and his experience with the shark is his first time getting into dangerous mess like this. And I think with John Boyega, you know, he's known for playing characters who just gets into crap, like I never seen Attack the Block, but with the description of Attack the Block, he's a street kid who all of a sudden there's an alien invasion, and with Star Wars, he's a stormtrooper who wants to jump ship and leave, but then he goes in this whole adventure. With Detroit, he's like this strip mall security guard, but then he gets into this whole mess with the police and with these innocent citizens who the police take hostage. And I think John Boyega is perfect for roles like that.
All right. Well, that was very good arguments all around. That was a heck of a round, everybody. All right, so I'll just start off at the top. Curtis, I really like your pick with John Boyega. As soon as you said it, I was like, okay, I got a vibe for what that character would be and how he would kind of feel pretty quickly. I like that the argument that you brought up that he argues well, he gives good banter, as it were, which is a big important thing for a character like Hooper. I also like that you brought up that he's a good age for someone who feels like they are fresh out of school, like Hooper kind of would be. Chelsea, going into yours, I liked your argument as well for Henry Golding, how I haven't seen more of the rom-coms. I did see The Gentleman though, so I got that range of the spectrum for what you're talking about. But I liked your argument of how he can go from goofy guy to kind of this ruthless, on the opposite side of it, smart but naive, strong but nerdy. I think that was an interesting dynamic. I also like that you brought up, that and the argument was kind of made. Yes, he is a very pretty man, but hair and makeup and glasses and that can go a long way with uglying down an attractive man. And George, I like the pick with Michael Pena. You're right that he is the perfect sidekick. He nails all of those comedic beats really, really well whenever they come to him. And he can hit the other side and be more dramatic and be more intense, with stuff like End of Watch and kind of seeing him hit that dramatic side of it. And I also like that, Pena is a scene stealer, but in a good way. You always kind of remember the scenes where he is. And that's a big thing for someone like Hooper. But at the end of the day, when it came down to, while I thoroughly enjoy John Boyega, he consistently has while he does consistently get in over his head and is panicked about it, weirdly, maybe it's because I see Boyega behind the scenes in addition to but I'm like, you can handle yourself. Like I'm not too worried about Boyega, even when he's facing alien invasions or any of those other different things. So honestly, I think at the end of the day, the choice that kind of fits within the age range and the kind of sassy attitude that would kind of work with the character, I have to go with Chelsea's choice of Henry Golding. So Danny, who's your choice?
Really good choices. I want to point out, good for all of you for picking bringing some diversity to this category. Good job, 2020. Little offended by George saying Roy Scheider not hot in Jaws. Come on.
I did say he's hot.
You were preaching some disrespect and
Tied his shirt is in that movie.
No, I was saying that's why Henry Golding should be Brodie, because Brodie's a hot piece of meat.
Yeah, and then you were like, and Roy Scheider not very hot.
I didn't say that. I said he's. I don't remember what I said.
You were disrespecting him, and I'm just gonna hold that against you. Anyway, I mean,
fine.
Look at that.
Alternate facts, Danny. That's fine.
I think Curtis won me over kind of right as the rebuttal started. I think as much as I like all the choices, I do think Pena's a slightly too old. Like you kind of part of what works about Dreyfuss is he's kind of this younger guy, and I mean, he was a high school in American Graffiti 2 years before Jaws came out. You do want someone green, a little bit more green in the tooth. So as much as I like Michael Pena, and I think he would be great in this movie, I just don't know if it's as Hooper. So it does come down to Golding, and honestly, again, like Curtis said, he's a little too cool. He's got a little too much swagger, and yeah, you can put makeup on. Yeah, you can I get acting's acting, but like there is just that manic energy that John Boyega has that I think more fits the character on the page, and I know the movie's not going to exist, but how we kind of see Dreyfuss of it, like Dreyfuss, like part of what's so great about him is he feels like he's a little bit short, and he's got the high voice, kind of the northeastern accent-y thing, where I just feel like Golding is a little too cool, and a little too cool in like a cold kind of way, where it's like he'd be a little more logical. Like just the way he I've heard him talk in Crazy Rich Asians in The Simple Favor. He's very logical and cool, and where I want someone a little more manic like John Boyega, so that's my pick.
All right, Erik, who's your choice?
Oh, I can't believe no one casted Danny as Hooper, because I keep seeing him right next to Roy Scheider. I'm like, right there, right there. But out of the three choices, those are all wonderful, wonderful choices, and it made it even harder because all of you had amazing points about all three actors. But if I had to choose, and I think he won me over after explaining Star Wars and the manic energy that he has, I got to go with John Boyega. Michael Pena, I love everything you said about him because he is the perfect sidekick, but I feel like it's been said so many times. He is on the bit of the older side, and I wish you brought up a little bit more points about some of the other work that he did besides Ant-Man. Henry Golding, I have not seen The Gentleman, so I feel really bad because I think if I had seen it, maybe I would have been a little more convinced because that was a great argument. But unfortunately, I have seen Crazy Rich Asians. I loved it. And also Last Holiday, I cannot picture that guy as Brodie. I mean, sorry, Hooper. I'm so sorry. I cannot picture him as Hooper. I more see him on the Brodie line. And yeah, I got to go with John Boyega.
All right, then. Jeff, who's your vote?
So for me, first things first, I will go and talk about George's pick of Michael Pena. For me personally, I didn't even see the age as a problem because it is 2020 and people are going back to school every day. So who's not to say that maybe he just got a later start? I feel, yeah, we're trying to make the same movie and stick to the same script, but at the same time, it's 2020. We're going to be making different decisions about scripts and characters in comparison to how we did it in the 70s. That's just kind of the way it is. With Michael Pena, the reason why I couldn't pick him is just with the comparison of Henry and John. Like, Michael Pena is one that I can't see him like going out and getting into the action of something like this, like actively. Like, I could see him more on the research side and maybe being back at headquarters, but maybe not getting as down and dirty with some of the stuff going on. So for me, it was between John and Henry. With John Boyega, I kind of had the same view that Danny had with Henry Golding. I feel like John Boyega might be a little too cool for the role because he's one that seems very capable when he is faced with conflict, and like, yeah, he has manic energy and it might freak out in the moment, but he always gets through stuff. I was leaning more to him until Chelsea brought up the fact of like, yeah, Henry Golding's hot, but we kind of quote unquote like frump down hot people all the time when it comes to movies. You think of Margot Robbie in I, Tonya. You think of Taron Egerton in Rocket Man. I do believe I really could see him as kind of like the nerdy research guy, and all you would have to do is change up his hairstyle and add some glasses onto him. So for me, I saw Henry Golding as the choice. I'm going to go with Chelsea's pick.
All right. Well, that means that we have a tie. So in the event of a tie, we go to our debater who isn't involved in the tie. So George, in this case, it would be you. So who is your choice, George, between Henry Golding and John Boyega?
I'm gonna go with John Boyega. I think he's got that youthful energy, and he's got it. He's got it, man. He's got that feeling.
All right, fantastic. Well, then our Matt Hooper for 2020 is going to be John Boyega. All right, we're continuing on with the crew of the Orca into, honestly, one of the most hard-working and saltiest sea captains of the seven seas. If you were to look up salty sea captain in the dictionary, you'd probably see a picture of Quint hanging out right there next to you, played by Robert Shaw. Now, he is a man of many talents in the world of Jaws. He runs a bootleg distillery, has a whale oil business, as well as his weekend charter service. But he has hunted more sharks than anyone else in and around Amityville. So he is the character that our leads decide to go to when they need a bit of help taking down the monstrous Jaws. So, Curtis, why don't you take us away with who you think should be playing our new 2020 Quint?
Okay, so my choice for Quint is the always amazing Michael Keaton. Now, Michael Keaton, to anyone who knows me, is one of my favorite actors of all time, probably my top 10 favorite actors of all time. I mean, he was Batman, for crying out loud, and of course, Beetlejuice, and his Oscar-nominated role in Birdman and in The Founder. With Quint, he's this hardened, hard-working sea captain, but he's a bit of a jerk too. He's a bit of a wisecracking jerk, and Michael Keaton could play that role in his sleep. It was, of course, what examples I just brought up with The Founder, with playing Vulture in Spider-Man: Homecoming. He could bring that intensity, he could bring that intimidation. He has that steel look in his eyes. He could turn that on instantly, especially when he's we're talking about the Indianapolis ship sinking, and you tell that horror story. He could be believable in that, and even though it was a subpar movie, even his role in the RoboCop remake, him as the villain, he even came out as this likable yet disgusting villain who just has this charm to him. He brings out this delivery that he makes you want to hate him, but you still love him at the same time. And that's what I like the mayor character. Quint is a character you like to hate and you like to love at the same time, because you love his sassiness, you love his snarkiness, you love how hardened he is, but sometimes he could be kind of a jerk that you want to punch in the face as well. And Michael Keaton brings all those qualities, so Michael Keaton is my choice for Quint.
All right. Chelsea, who's your choice?
My choice was Matthew McConaughey. And unfortunately, to those of you who haven't seen The Gentleman, he does a great job playing the villain in that, and a likable villain, and somebody that you still want to win. You want him to win in the end. And he's also just really shown his, his variety, like how broad of an actor he is over the last few years, with his Oscar-winning role in, God, now I can't think of it, with Jared Leto about the guys who had AIDS.
Dallas Buyers Club.
The what?
Dallas Buyers Club.
Yeah, Dallas Buyers Club. And I mean, and then just he started out with like the rom-coms and everything, and then Mississippi Lawyer and like Dallas Buyers Club, and he could still do funny, and he can come across as like that kind of crazy. Like Quint seems like a crazy guy. Like he's seen so much. He's been out on the ocean so much, and he's hunted so many sharks that he seems like he's just, I know more than you, and I'm smarter than you when it comes to sharks, but I'm also just like a little bit off up here because of all that I've done, and because of all that I've seen. And, also the heat, McConaughey really, he looks like the original actor, that played Quint, as far as like the tousled hair, the crazy face, really dark tan going on. I can see him as that rugged, thick-skinned guy who has been on the water just all the time. He's always out there hunting sharks, fishing, on his boat, whatever he's doing. And I can see him as that tough fisherman guy. And he's, at the same time, he's also kind of like, I guess, awkward. Like, he doesn't really know how to work with people because he's so used to being out on his boat. He's so used to being alone and just fishing and hunting. And he just, I mean, from that first moment when you meet him, and he's the nail scrape and he's just like, I'll get your shark, I can see all of that from Mcconaughey and just being like this weirdo that everybody's like, okay, why are we putting our faith in this guy? And, that scene also, one of my favorite lines, and it's something that my son likes to quote, is when he goes in the water in the cage. You go in the cage, cage goes in the water, sharks in the water. And I can picture McConaughey doing that and just being like, all right, I mean, not to do the all right, but, just kind of like looking at him like, that's crazy, you're crazy. I thought I was crazy, everybody thinks I'm crazy, you're crazy for getting in that water. And I can really just see him portraying that character really well, whereas he's nice, but he's also messed up and too smart for his own good, and he really thinks he's got it handled, and he doesn't understand the power of this shark. And I think that he could really come across with that.
All right. And George, who do you think should play our new Quint?
All right. So for Quint, I've chosen Mr. Nicolas Cage. This one was the one I took the longest on, and when I thought of Nicolas Cage as Quint, I was very excited. This is probably my favorite choice. I just feel like, kind of like Michael Keaton, he's just someone who is always entertaining and just, I feel like has kind of become almost like a punchline at this point, but I think we forget how good of an actor he is and how he's always eccentric, but he's also capable of, being dramatic. And I can imagine him having that Indianapolis speech where he's talking about the sharks, and possibly might have to update it. Maybe he wasn't in World War II. Maybe he was in a different war if it's, set today. But I just feel like he kind of needs that comeback role. I mean, obviously he's still been working a lot, but I think this could be really cool. Like if somebody told me that Nicolas Cage was Quint in a Jaws remake, that would be enough for me to buy a ticket. What else was I gonna say? Yeah, I was just thinking, like, if it is set in modern day, maybe he was an Army vet, but maybe he was like in the Marines or something, and that led to some kind of encounter with the sharks. And I think that Robert Shaw was like robbed of an Oscar for Jaws, and I think this could be something that could, if done right, could give Nicolas Cage, another Oscar nomination, and could just remind people how awesome he is. He's not just like a crazy person. So yeah, that's my choice.
Good. Well, debaters, have it out.
Okay, so for Nicolas Cage, the notion of Nicolas Cage playing Quint, it does sound like an awesome idea. I'll give you that, George. It's because Nicolas Cage, unfortunately, as much as a lot of us cinephiles know, he could be a great actor. He could be amazing, Nicolas Cage, if given the right role. It's just that what today's audience is, he's fortunate, and he just unfortunately does have that stigma of no one, when anyone watches him on screen, they can't take him seriously because, of the internet culture around Nicolas Cage and the memes, the not the bees and the I'm a vampire and the vampire's kiss scenes and stuff like that, and a lot of other stuff, and like stuff like I can eat a peach for hours, and the way he just delivers his lines. I think that he just has a stigma to the audience. Like whenever they watch Nicolas Cage on screen, they expect him any minute to say, "I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence." Like it's just with a movie like Jaws, even though this was intended to be a studio's B movie, it turned out to be something more than that. Even though with this Jaws, like it's up in the air still how this movie is going to turn out, but using the same script, taking it seriously as much as the filmmakers and Spielberg took it seriously the same way, it's going to come across the wrong way with casting someone like a Nicolas Cage in this film. and audiences just think of the guy who wants to do the Declaration of Independence, not as this hardened, snarky sea captain. And with Matthew McConaughey, he's also a great actor. He's also could be phenomenal. It's because it's Matthew McConaughey. He has that vibe to him that a lot of people know him. They know him as the all right guy. And McConaughey, as much as he tried to hide that was it Texan or Salvan accent, whatever that Salvan accent that he has, as much as he tried to hide it in movies where he's trying to hide it, it still kind of comes out. It's still there, and I can't see Matthew McConaughey as a sea captain. I can see him more as a beach bum. And oddly enough, he was in a movie called Beach Bum where he played a beach bum. It's just, Nicolas Cage. I could, as a cinephile myself, George, I wouldn't mind him singing the role. It's just when you think about the audience, he just has that stigma to him. And McConaughey, he could be a great actor, but I take him less seriously than I do if Nicolas Cage were playing the role. I just think with Michael Keaton, he has that hardened look. He has that snarkiness to him. Especially that we casted Boyega already as Matt Cooper. I could totally see Michael Keaton having those scenes with John Boyega and working off each other. John Boyega already has experience acting aside guys like Harrison Ford and The Force Awakens. So with Michael Keaton, I think he can have a ball with that. They can complement each other easily, and that's part of the unit in the movies, chemistry between actors. But I want to hear what you two have to say though.
I honestly, I think that all of them are great. However, my only issue with Nicolas Cage, I love Nicolas Cage.
Love him too.
I'm playing him in the Con Air thing. But he is, I think that, like what you're saying about how this could come across, this could finally be, a chance for him to come out and show that he is still a great actor. But in my remembrance of the movie, just from the characterization of Quint, he's kind of crazy. And so if you put Nicolas Cage in there, you're going to be like, well, this is Nicolas Cage. He's crazy. Like, I kind of thought of Johnny Depp for the role, but I was like, he would just be like Jack Sparrow. And it's, as much as I love Nicolas Cage, I feel like he would just be too Nicolas Cagey, I guess, for that role. Curtis, for yours, I have no argument because you stole my first pick. Michael Keaton was my first pick, so I can't argue. I think he would be great. We've seen him go crazy, even in Batman. He was a total laid back guy, and then all of a sudden, you want to get nuts. So I have no argument there. So.
I think Michael Keaton's a great choice too. I think similar to Nicolas Cage, I kind of want Nicolas Cage again to just kind of have this comeback role. And originally when I thought of him, I was thinking of the tone of this remake being a little bit different. Maybe not like comedic, but maybe a little more like over the top. So you're right, if Nicolas Cage was Quint, maybe his inclination would be to go kind of crazy. But I think if we keep it the tone that it had in 1975, I think that Nicolas Cage could put in a great performance, provided, he has the right director to kind of keep him. He can be intense and eccentric, but not like, full on Bangkok Dangerous. But yeah, I don't know. I think Nicolas Cage is capable of toning it down. I think maybe just him being crazy has been encouraged by directors that, want him to behave that way. But I think that with the right directing and the right persuasion, he could put in a great performance and not be completely insane. And Matthew McConaughey, I think it's an interesting choice, but again, I don't really see him as Quint. I don't know if he's too attracted to play Quint, but he might be too young to play Quint. I just don't really see it. Again, he just kind of seems like the guy that would be hanging out on the beach. Maybe that's the Quint aspect, but if I had to pick between the two, I would say Michael Keaton's the better choice. Yeah.
Is that it?
That's
right.
it, yeah,
Seems
sorry.
like that is the end of the arguments all around. Let's know any last minute points to make. All right, cool. Then we'll start off right at the top. Curtis, I like, I mean, Keaton is Keaton. I mean, I'm right there with you where it's like, well, he's Batman and Beetlejuice and Vulture and Birdman. Like anything you name fits really well with like why Keaton would be a really, really fun Quint. I like that you bring up that he's the wisecrack and jerk. His delivery always kind of works for him. He plays characters that you hate, but you can't help but love them. I think always would make a really good potential Quint. Chelsea, with Matthew McConaughey, I think he's an interesting choice. There's a movie I'm shocked you didn't bring up for his, which is Serenity, which came out just last year, where he actually plays a sea captain. He's a deep sea fisherman. So I could see certain aspects of that in there, but I like the point you made where it's a lot of times McConaughey comes across as like, I know more and I'm smarter than you, and because of that, I'm kind of off. And that plays very well for someone like Quint. And George, when you got to Nicolas Cage, honestly, I couldn't help but mostly just stop and really just start imagining what that would potentially be. I started thinking of Nick Cage kind of how he was in Mandy, where he was, because he is given that good performance. I like that you brought up that he's always entertaining, that he can be a punchline, but he can bring in a really good performance. And at the end of the day, like with Quint, you want someone who is a bit older and who kind of feels like they would kind of fit with the rest of this crew, but also is entertaining and memorable in those scenes. And honestly, for me, with the argument you made, that was Nick Cage. So if I had to put my vote behind, I would say Nick Cage for Quint. All right, so moving on next. Jess, what do you think?
This one was another one that was really hard just because I feel like any one of these three could play Quint and nothing would seem off. Like, I feel like each one of these three could kind of fall into the role and it'd be fine. With Matthew McConaughey, he is very talented. I could see him kind of pulling it off. I kind of agreed with George's point that he might be just a little too young, just by like a couple years in comparison to Michael Keaton or to Nick Cage. With Michael Keaton and Nick Cage, they just seem a little bit more weathered to me as in comparison to Matthew McConaughey. Not to say that he couldn't pull it off. It's just I have a hard time hoping that he would, or thinking that he would. Like I want to be a little bit more sure that like, oh yeah, he could definitely pull this off. So for me, it was between Michael and Nick, both of which I think could play kind of like, the old sea captain kind of vibe, but also like be a little bit more eccentric and have it not seem to be too much of a show or seem a little bit too over the top. But for me, I feel like especially with the trajectory that Michael Keaton's career has kind of taken lately, I don't know. I can't really see this being a role that he could be interested in comparison to Nick Cage. So my pick was going to be George as Nick Cage.
All right. Danny, who are you thinking?
It's real tough. This is another really tough one. I can see McConaughey in this, and I can see the moves he'd play, and I just don't want to see that. Like, no offense, Chelsea, it's an interesting pick. He's a good actor. You made good arguments. But I don't want that, So it is Cage or it is Keaton, and I will pay thousands of dollars to see Keaton do the scene where they're showing scars and he does the monologue. Like, I really want to see that. I love Keaton so much. But, on the movie, Robert Shaw was drunk a lot of the time and was a little belligerent. He apparently was offering Richard Dreyfuss that he would up the ante of like thousands of dollars for him to climb up on the mast and jump off, and would keep calling him a coward. He until Spielberg intervened. He apparently had to leave set every now and then to go to Canada because he had to evade taxes. As something I listened to said, as I on the Rewatchables podcast said, he had 10 children with 3 or 4 women, I think, drank every day, and died at 51. He lived. Kind of. In a way. I think Nick Cage, just the very core of his being, he is that wild card energy. So let's go Cage. Let's see what he can do. He can. And George, you bring up good points. Like, he is a good actor when he can be roped in. And, like, I think if, like, we got a director who would have enough, like, to be like, no, you can't do your, like, how he did the alphabet or all those, like, those things we see where Nick Cage goes crazy, like, those montages looped together. Like, you bring him in, which I think he has which I think Cage can do stuff where he's brought in. I think it'd be a really cool performance. So Cage.
Right. And Erik, who do you think?
I gotta say, all three of these choices absolutely amazing. This is by far the hardest round of them all. And Curtis, the second I heard you say Michael Keaton, I am like, how can anyone beat this? Because Keaton is just perfect. And yeah, Chelsea, you're right. It's just that is very tough to argue with. Well, speaking of your choice, Matthew McConaughey, I love him. Amazing actor. And my only problem is he is just too cool. I don't know if he could really bring that screw loose to the role very well. And I mean, I've seen him play villains before, or just kind of anti-hero, especially like True Detective and a movie I hope people have seen, but brace yourself. It's called Killer Joe. That's a movie.
I've seen that. Yep.
Very tough to unsee Matthew McConaughey in that. But he knew what he was doing. I think he had total control. Quint, I feel like, is that character. I mean, yeah, he does have control, but wow, I am really describing Matthew McConaughey. He really would fit this character. But I feel like George won me over with Nicolas Cage because he has played crazy his whole career. But also he does have like a dial, because we've all seen him probably at like a 2 or 3, maybe in National Treasure. So, I mean, he can he doesn't have to always be crazy, but if he needs to, he will. But also I can see him having a great relationship with the other characters. And another movie he was in called Joe, where I think he had really good chemistry with Ty Sheridan in that. I think he'd have great chemistry. He would fit that manic energy also with John Boyega, now that we've casted him, and whoever we cast as Brodie. But I think Nicholas will work really well with with a group and bring a lot of energy to it. And just, I think he'd be so fun too. Because I think the one thing about Quint, even though he's belligerent all the time, he was fun. He was a fun character. But if I saw Matthew McConaughey, I couldn't unsee Captain Ron. I'd be like, wow, I can't believe no one thought about Kurt Russell. But for Nicolas Cage, I got to give him the edge. Nicolas Cage.
All right. Well, that means that our new Quint for 2020 Jaws is Nicolas Cage. All right. Well, now we move into the Chief of Police, where with our small town of Amity Island, we have Martin Brody, played originally by Roy Scheider. Now, when it comes to the character, something that is interesting with his backstory, born and raised in New York, and then has eventually ended up here in Amity. So, unlike a lot of the other characters, he is kind of a fresh face to this locale. But once tasked with trying to keep the town safe and protect everybody from shark attacks, he steps up and, of course, delivers that great final line, "Smile pretty, you son of a," before detonating a giant air tank and getting rid of the villainous Jaws once and for all. So, Curtis, who do you think should be playing our new Martin Brody?
Okay. My pick for Martin Brody is the always popular, always awesome, always charming, always charismatic Michael B. Jordan. Michael B. Jordan is on a roll right now. I mean, you got Fruitvale Station, you talk about Creed, you talk about Black Panther, you talk about Just Mercy, which should have gotten more Oscar love, by the way. This guy just brings it in his role. He's always so dedicated, even when he's in trash, like Four Stick, the 2015 Fantastic Four, as Johnny Storm. He's still solid. He still brings his game. He never brings less than 100% in his performances, even if he's in something subpar. He takes his roles seriously. And going back to since we already cast Vanessa Hudgens as Ellen Brody, who doesn't want to see Michael B. Jordan and Vanessa Hudgens as a couple? That would be a really hot couple. The chemistry I can imagine to be just so lightning and so full of life. They could be just that lovable young couple. And as Logan said, this is a guy who's been born and raised in New York. Michael B. Jordan easily has that type of vibe to him. I don't think he's originally. I don't think he himself is from New York, but he could be that type of guy who's been a cop on the rough streets of New York. I could totally see that. I could totally see Vanessa Hudgens also as a girl from New York, and both of them growing up there, but they're moving to this this wonder-bred small town of New England town of Amity Island, and they feel like fish out of water. That could totally add a new dynamic to the film. And being this young police chief, it could add more tension between, especially since he's a person of color. It could add more tension between him and the mayor and him and the civilians. You could see why, like, especially in today's climate, how civilians don't trust him. Like he's this young guy, and there's other layers why they don't trust him. Why they think he's odd, and why they see him as more of a fish out of water. And he always plays characters who are so determined to reach your goals and are so determined to find a solution and create. He's determined to be a world professional boxer and live out the shadow of his father. And in Just Mercy, he's devoted into freeing Walter McMillan and giving justice to these inmates on death row. And I see him as a police chief who wants to keep his town safe and wants to go after this shark and deal with that situation. And he's that actor who elevates other people in his cast. Like Vanessa Hudgens is not seen as a thespian, but he can elevate Vanessa Hudgens. He can elevate John Boyega, and he doesn't. There's no need for elevating Nicolas Cage, but especially with the how we see Nicolas Cage in today's life, he can help elevate Nicolas Cage and help Nicolas Cage bring his status up to that quality level. So that's my argument. That's my choice is Michael B. Jordan.
All right, Chelsea, who's your choice?
My choice is Sam Rockwell. I love Sam Rockwell. He's great in everything. He was a cop in 3 Billboards, and he was somebody that you just hated him at the beginning of the movie, and then by the end of it, you're like, all right, this guy's awesome. He did a total turnaround. But he was great just as comedically in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and he held down the movie. I believe it's called Moon. It was crazy, that movie. It was so just out there, but he did it, and he did a great job, I feel like, of the soul almost all by himself supporting the role in that movie, and it really showcased his acting ability and how versatile he is. And he does, like Curtis was saying with Mcconaughey, he can really come across with that Southern accent, but he can also do, other things. And he was actually recently in Trolls World Tour, and he had a Swedish accent. And so he can do all over the place. And I can see him as a guy who came from New York. You just clean up his scruff a little, and he's totally well-kept, good-looking guy, kind of like the way Rob was. And I don't know that I could see him, unfortunately, now that we've cast Vanessa Hudgens. It could work. Look at, those movies where the guys and the girls have a 30-year age gap, like Sean Connery and Catherine Zeta-Jones. So it could work. And especially, I also think that he has more of the age appropriateness. He's not, he's like around 40. he seems more like the type who would want to take his family and move them to a smaller community out of New York. You know, he is a more seasoned cop. He's been in New York for a while, and he's seen the horrors. And he's like, you know what, my kids are getting older. Like, I still have this younger one, you know, I still have this almost baby, and I have an older one, and I really want to raise them somewhere where there's not all this craziness, like just this violence and absolute terror. And so for me, he was that perfect age that was just like, all right, you know what, I'm going to move to a quieter community. I want to settle down and raise my family in this, you know, quiet community. And because also he has that experience of that, he's very protective of the community. So when he gets there and the shark attacks, that's why, you know, I feel like he could portray that urgency of no, I've seen violence. We don't want any more violence. You want to keep this place nice and quiet and serene, and you need to just, you know, keep everybody out of the water until we figured out this situation. And he could definitely come across as a protective father type figure to all of Amity, in that he saw the violence in New York, and then he wants to come there and just be like, I'm here to, you know, settle down and raise my family, and I don't want all this violence. It followed me from New York. And he can be very stern, Sam Rockwell. He can be very stern and forthcoming, but he can also be that kind of like, I could be intimidated because, you know, like with the mayor, you know, I'm not going to hit him, even though, oh, I'm a tough guy, I came from New York, and he can pull that off, but he can also be like, you know what, I know when to back down, I know when it's not my place. And so for me, Sam Rockwell was just a really good choice, because I just love how he can portray all those different emotions.
All right, George, who's your choice?
All right, so as I kind of mentioned earlier, I went a different direction here a bit. I decided to make Brodie a woman, so I chose Carla Gugino, partly because it would be a Snake Eyes reunion with Nicolas Cage, but also real reasons. I just think that I mean, as we talked about earlier, Brodie's a babe, so it would be good to cast Carla Gugino, but also I feel like she's kind of gotten relegated to playing a lot of like wife roles, and when I was growing up, I was associated her with the mom in Spy Kids, so obviously she's like a mom and a wife in that, but I just feel like she's good at action. I just feel like she's a really compelling lead character, and the few times I've seen her play a leading role, I feel like she hasn't gotten to do something like this, and I just think it would be interesting, now that we have John Boyega as Hooper. I was kind of thinking this with Michael Pena too. You know, you'd have a woman, and then you'd have Quint as kind of this old salty sea captain. I don't want him to necessarily be like racist or sexist, but he would definitely maybe have a problem, you know, listening to Brodie because she's a woman, and kind of he already looks down on Hooper in the original because he thinks he's young and doesn't know what he's talking about. So there could be a little bit of that kind of tension, you know, racial tension, and kind of him mistreating Brodie a little bit because he doesn't want to answer to a woman. I'm missing anything here. But yeah, I just think it would be an interesting choice. And obviously, if we're going with the same script, there would have to be a few changes, but I think that she would fit in the current script. But yeah, I picked Carla Gugino.
All right, well, debaters, make your arguments.
Well,
I'd just like to say, I think, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I just really like to say, I was thinking ahead to the Carla Gugino, and personally, if we made it a lesbian couple, I could see her with Vanessa Hudgens, even though she is older. I mean, if they're moving from New York,
Yeah.
you know, I know that we're sticking with the script, but like, you know, like we were talking about earlier, scripts change, and you can, you know, update it to the times. And I think that she could do a good job in that. She is a bit older, so that's my only concern. And then my concern with Michael B. Jordan is the opposite. He is so young. Like, again, I know we cast Vanessa Hudgens, but I really don't feel like why would he leave New York? He seems like the type of guy that he's tough. He wants to be in New York. He really wants to be, like the kind of guy that wants to make a name for himself. Kind of like, the young cop who is just starting out and really wants to go somewhere. And I just wonder, like, why would he want to move? I mean, I know that in the script, yes, he has kids, so he's a young family man, but it probably pays way less. It's a much different way of living. So moving to a place like Amity for somebody that young, I don't see it.
It's like what it's pretty much the same reason like what you said about, Sam Rockwell wanting to live out in New York. I mean, I could see why, he would want to stay there. He wanted to go up in the ranks, but maybe it's that maybe he has a harder time going up into the ranks in New York, and maybe the reason why he took that position as being the police chief in Amity Island, because at least he has that authority. At least he gets promoted to being that authority in Amity Island because they need a police chief, despite how young Michael B. Jordan is, and in New York, most people in New York live in these crappy apartments. I mean, it's even if you're a cop, and so at least in Amity Island, when you move there, he has his own house, he has his own family home. I will say Sam Rockwell is a great choice, and so is Carl Gugino. My reason for thinking Michael B. Jordan is one, of course, he'd be a nice fit with Vanessa Hudgens, but with two, this is a type of role, like, I haven't really seen Michael B. Jordan do something that's really close to horror. I think he could do really well in that, because he's such an actor that has such a range that he knows how to work with intensity. He knows how he can. I feel like he knows what to do when his character has to be in some sort of suspense. And this could be a gem to his resume. And with Brodie being the lead character, I think Michael B. Jordan has shown time and time again he's solid enough as a lead actor that people can believe him as the guy who's leading this cast. If you get someone young like Michael B. Jordan, you could see why this could be a character who wants to get on top of this situation, because Amity Island, for the most part, before this whole crap started with the shark, was a pretty quiet and crimeless little town. And so with him handling the shark, this could finally, with him moving and becoming a chief, and him with the shark, he finally finds something he could handle. He finally finds something that he could handle, and people see him. Wow, he's a competent police chief. He has responsibility. We could trust him. We are confident that he can be our police chief, not only in Amity Island, but if he wants to ever move back to New York, people in New York compare what he did over there. It's like, wow, this guy has some chops to him. So, and especially with someone being that young, he easily he's someone who wants to prove himself, and he does. Michael B. Jordan plays a lot of characters like that. When you're talking about his character in Just Mercy and in Black Panther and in Creed, he's always trying to prove something of himself. He's good at playing determined characters like that. And with him being young and being a police chief, he's played characters who seem young, but they have quite the experience. They have quite the resume to them. I mean, in Just Mercy, he's this young guy who's able to bring these people out of death row. In Black Panther, yeah, he's young, but he's this skilled assassin. He's been trained for years and years so that he could challenge T'Challa and become the king of Wakanda. So I could see Michael B. Jordan as someone, yeah, he has a young face, but you know what? He has some experience.
But he's so, like, my issue is he is so young that I feel like he would be bored. I mean, you even said that he sees the shark as a challenge. It seems like, why would you go into that and be a cop? And if you want a challenge, stay in New York. going to a quiet little island where probably nothing's going to happen. I mean, yeah, something happens, you know, Jaws happened, but I just don't see why he would move, especially if he is that determined, you know, New Yorker, strong-willed,
Because at least
looking for a challenge guy. Like, why would you move to a quiet little town? He doesn't strike me as that guy.
Because at least he's given authority. At least he's given the position as chief. I mean, yeah, it is quiet, but at least he's given the position as chief where he could.
He's in a position of authority, but as you even said, like, it'll cause racial tension in that situation. It's a small town. So, yeah, he's given a position of authority, but there's going to be people there who are like,
and that you know what? That could add another layer to the movie. That could even though it doesn't have to be focused on that much, because that's not the focus of the movie. The focus of the movie is a shark, but that could add a little more tension to the movie. That could add more drama to the movie. That could add more layers. I mean, with his relationship with you know, what we got John Carroll Lynch now as the mayor, that could add more layer to their tension, to their relationship, that racial tension. So, in my opinion, that could help the movie. That could benefit it and make it timely.
Well, but you could also have that already with Hooper, just because, you know, if he came in, you know, you could have, like, what George was saying, like, when Nick Cage, not necessarily racist, but maybe a little bit, like, leaning towards, like, I don't know about you, I don't know if you know anything, like, that's already there. Not to say that you can't have, you know, more than one person of color. I mean, we have Vanessa Hudgins as well, but I'm just, we could have that racial tension with them as well. Whereas I kind of feel like, you know, it might even be a bit much for Nicolas Cage's character if it was, you know, just that dynamic on the boat where there's. Yeah,
but with John Boyega as Cooper, Cooper's not a guy in authority. So he's a young marine biologist. So there's nothing for the townspeople or people in authority to be complaining about with that. With Michael B. Jordan as the police chief, you could have the civilians being questioned, like, should we have this? Should our lives be in the hands of this guy? I think that idea could add more tension, could add more drama to the movie than it already has. And the Jaws already is a perfect movie, but that could add even more soul to it. But I want to hear what George has to say, because I want to give him more time.
I just really quick, I just want to finalize. I get your point. I still just can't see it because of how young he is. I don't understand why he would want to leave New York. That's just me personally. I can see Sam Rockwell as a seasoned cop who is just trying to get out of the violence of the city. Whereas if he's so gung-ho and driven, why does he want to leave New York? I don't see it. But yeah, George.
I mean, those are both really cool choices, like obviously very different choices. I was looking up, Sam Rockwell's 51, which is kind of crazy. He looks good. So he's maybe closer to the correct age for Brodie. I do think Michael B. Jordan is a little young, but I'm not necessarily opposed to it because he's too young, especially if he's, you know, married to Vanessa Hudgens and they're kind of more of like a newer or a young couple and new to the town. I could almost see it. I mean, Curtis brings up some good points, but maybe more like New York was just kind of crazy and dangerous, and he wants kind of a place where he can settle down with a family and where it's going to be nice and quiet, and he doesn't expect something crazy to happen, which is kind of what happens in the original Jaws, because if you remember, like, when you meet him and his family, he's leaving the house, and his wife's like, be careful. And he's like, in this town, like, anything bad's going to happen in this town. This town's, you know, perfect. Nothing bad's going to happen. So I could definitely see Michael B. Jordan wanting to live in that kind of town where he can kind of settle down with a family. Sam Rockwell is also a really cool choice. I think he can be dramatic and also be kind of funny. Like, Brodie's not necessarily a comedic character, but he definitely has a lot of good, you know, wisecracks and gets a lot of good lines, like, you know, you're going to need a bigger boat. So I could see Sam Rockwell doing that as well. So, you know, both cool choices, both very different. Yeah, pretty much it.
Okay.
All right. Well, it's a very good round for our lead character for the film. So starting us off with Curtis, I like the fit for Michael B. Jordan. I think you're right. He always brings this very determined attitude. This like, I've got to either be the best or I've got to be succeeding in whatever I'm doing, whether it's military service, boxing, being a race car driver who's on fire, for Fan Forstick. But he's always trying to find those ways to, be better. And he always brings his A game, which is pretty consistent. I mean, I remember when he showed up in an episode of House, and he was still on point with all of that. Chelsea, I like the points you were making for Sam Rockwell, because Sam is just one of those really good actors. I like that you brought up the range of everything from Moon to Trolls World Tour. That's a big range to be covering for an actor. I actually didn't know that he was in Trolls World Tour, so that's kind of fun. But it was also brought up that he is, while he is a closer age to the original Brodie and comes across as more seasoned, he might be a little bit too old to be believable in the relationship with Vanessa Hudgens. And then with George, I really like the choice of Carla Gugino. I think she's one of those outside the box choices where everyone consistently sees her and stuff, and they're like, ooh, right, she's really good, but then she just hasn't gotten enough big mainstream roles to kind of let us know that she's there and is a force to be reckoned with. I also think that I agree that she is the age discrepancy between her and Hudgens feels less drastic and weird than it does with someone like Sam Rockwell. But at the end of the day, I think Curtis made the best argument. There was a lot of points that he was making for Michael that just a lot of the different descriptions he was making seemed to fit. While I can agree, I don't necessarily, while I don't recall exactly if it's kids or if there's some other tweak where it's why he's going to Amity. But especially if we are seeing especially Michael coming off of some of the stuff he's done recently, I think he's right at the cusp of being all right, I'm retiring to this town a smidge early because I was so determined to be the best at what I could do. So yeah, I think if I had to put a vote in, I would put for Curtis's choice for Michael B. Jordan. All right, so Erik, who are you thinking?
That was a great round, y'all. But all three of you have great choices. So this is another tough one, but gotta make a decision. Carla Gugino, that is a great choice, and on-site love to see her with Vanessa Hutchins. And it's just that she's been in action movies for years, and I think that would be a great opportunity for her, especially after her breakout performance. I hope people don't consider a comeback role, but Haunting on Hill House? I just hope she continues to rise after how incredible she was in that. Or in that case, I hope Mike Flanagan directs this movie. In that case, she will get the role. Also, Sam Rockwell is a wonderful choice, Chelsea. And seen his movies ever since I first saw him in Galaxy Quest, so I've always grown up on his work. My only issue with him, he's another actor where I feel like he would want to go after Quint and not the hero character. I feel like he would want to play a character that's a little bit more of a mystery character that he could grow with a little more, because after seeing him in Seven Psychopaths,
oh yeah,
it's very hard to unsee that, and I'm like, that's where I think he'd make a much better Quint than he'd make a Brodie. But great choice, though. And I think he could play the role very well, but Seven Psychopaths came out, so I'll blame Martin McDonagh for that one.
It's a good movie.
Yeah, it's so good. Martin, it's still in my head. Michael B. Jordan. I got to give him, I feel like he would probably be the best Brodie, honestly, because you said it perfectly, Curtis, about he and Vanessa Hutchins would have wonderful chemistry, but also he has worked with a giant ensemble for a long time, but if it's just him, Nicolas Cage, and John Boyega, I can just see the three of them really getting along at times, hating each other at times, and especially after I could see Michael B. Jordan, just the look of horror on his face after he sees the shark for the first time, just back up slowly. You're going to need a bigger boat. I can't believe no one has said that yet. But I think all the iconic lines, and then just the big moment when it's him versus the shark. I could see, he's another actor that can do a lot with his eyes. And I feel like whoever gets to direct this will really capture his expression perfectly before, spoiler alert, what happens to the shark at the end. So I think Logan said it perfectly. You made the best argument, Curtis. So Michael B. Jordan.
All right. Danny, who are you thinking?
Another one. I'll say about Sam Rockwell, he's probably the closest to Roy Scheider that we have now. He just, in the way he's kind of a leading man, but not so conventionally. and the fact that he played Bob Fosse on Fosse Verdon, and Roy Scheider's like second most famous role is playing the Bob Fosse stand-in and all that jazz. So to me, that's just too easy a choice, unfortunately. And I do kind of agree. Michael B. Jordan, and like this, the arguments made against him, I just thought were very compelling. It's just that he's a younger guy. He doesn't seem like a guy who's at the point where I have 2 kids. New York's a tough place. I'm ready to take it easy. Where, I don't know. I could see that for Carla Gugino. And I think that's just also a fascinating choice. And I want to see her do it. So, Carla.
All right. Judge Jess, what are you thinking? You're muted, Jess.
Thanks. This one was hard for me just because I feel like there's pros and cons for all 3 of them. I think that they would all be a great choice or maybe just a little bit off the mark. I really liked George's pitch of Carla Gugino. I just wish that I wish you had a better like closing argument for her, because I really loved like your pitch for her. I thought you had a very compelling pitch about, you know, it is 2020, like seeing her in a relationship with a woman and also being a female kind of leader, that maybe she doesn't get like the respect that she deserves with everything going on. With Michael B. Jordan, Curtis, you made a really good argument about, you know, being in a small town and racial tensions and stuff like that. And he does have that leadership quality to him. Sam Rockwell, I could definitely see in a role like this. What it came down to me was this is really with the choice of Vanessa Hudgens. With Vanessa Hudgens, I just can't see her having chemistry with Sam Rockwell. They have almost like a parental-child relationship to me that I could not buy them as a couple with children. And I could see her having that with both Carla or with Michael B. Jordan. This is where it gets tough because, you know, with Michael B. Jordan, Curtis, you did give a really good argument, but I have to agree with Chelsea that I would just find it a little hard to buy him being ready to settle down when he does seem like not even settle down, but he's so young that it's hard to believe that he would be willing to move to a small town to raise his family when he does seem so young and driven. Whereas with Carla, if she seems like she would be at that age range where she wants to settle down in a small town and think of her family, and it's not uncommon, especially in LGBTQ relationships, to have kind of May December romances. It's tough for me because I think just with the fact that we are making this in 2020 and representation and stuff like that, I'm going to go with George's choice for Carla.
Right. So that puts us at an even split, the vote 2-2. So in this case, the vote shifts to Chelsea. You are the deciding vote on this one. So who do you think is a better fit for our 2020 Brodie? Michael B. Jordan or Carla Gugino?
Well, I mean, as far as we've all heard my argument, so I'm going to go with Carla. I really would like to see that. I think that she would be great in that. I think that, you know, the age gap isn't a thing. That you see that a lot with, you know, LGBTQ. And I can totally see how she would come from New York and how she would end up in a small town, you know, wanting to raise her family. And she would have, you would still have that dynamic of, you know, the not racial tension, but the sexual tension as far, well, sexism, you know, like because she's a woman and because she's lesbian, there would be that small town like, and we have to take orders from you, you know. So I really like her for that role.
All right, then. Well, then it is decided. Our 2020 Brodie is going to be Carla Gugino. All right, well, here we are at the final round for Jaws, which means we are choosing a new director. Now, when it comes to this, I think we all agree this was the first big thing most of us saw from Steven Spielberg. So we need a director who's going to be hitting it in that dynamic range in a very hard way. But a reminder I want to give our debaters as we're going into this: we are trying to keep the script as is. The three directors that y'all have chosen, they are all known for writing their own scripts as they're doing it. But for all three across the board, we're solely focusing on their directing skills, not necessarily their skills as a writer as well. So, Curtis, why don't you take us away?
So my choice for director is this really impressive director who for his first two films has knocked it out of the park completely, and with his especially in the horror range, is Robert Eggers, who you know as the director of A24's The Witch and The Lighthouse, and he did a splendid job on both of those films. The reason why I chose Robert Eggers is because he knows how to build that slow tension. That's what Jaws is known for. It's kind of a slow burn, but it's that builds tension really good, especially when you don't see the shark. And Robert Eggers is great when trying to portray things that you're not supposed to see, but you're supposed to imagine in your head, like with The Witch. You don't. I mean, if you see the witch sometimes in the film, but where her actions is mostly off screen. An amazing scene when Anya Taylor-Joy is playing like peekaboo with the baby, and like a couple of times it's like a normal peekaboo game, but then like the fourth time to this peekaboo, the baby disappears. You know what happens? Like in that couple of seconds, the baby's just gone. Like how does that happen? Like what's going on here? The suspense is building from that scene, and with The Lighthouse, when Robert Pattinson is spying on Willem Dafoe doing voice things, I'll leave it at that. On the top of the lighthouse, and you don't know what Willem Dafoe is seeing. You don't know what he's being enchanted by. You don't know what he's infatuated by, but it's a mystery, and Jaws is all about that mystery about the shark. The shark itself is a mystery, not of just how it looks, but why is it behaving this way? Why is it acting this way? Why is it so persistent in getting these three guys? Of all of the fish and all the creatures that can eat in the sea, why is it going after these three guys? That's the mystery of this movie, really. And because most sharks, if they can't eat something, you just go move on to the next thing that they can eat. But this shark from Jaws is different. I think Robert Eggers could really do a great job in portraying that mystery, not just how the monster looks, but why is it doing what it's doing. So, choice is Robert Eggers.
All right. Chelsea, who's your choice?
My choice for director was Joss Whedon. And my reasoning was, he did Avengers, so he knows action. He knows, working with big, I guess it could be big budget now, now that we're not doing it back then with the independence that it had. And, working with big actors. And also just one of the things that really sold me with him was Buffy. That's comedy mixed with suspense / horror just because of the monsters. And, but it's, it was campy too. And that's something about Jaws. Whereas, even though, yes, it's suspenseful, we do have those comedic moments, and to a point where it almost seems campy a couple of times just because of the way the actors are playing off of each other and the lines they use. And so to me, that sold me, like I said, the Buffy Jaws just really seems to fit well. He worked with special effects with that, as far as makeup effects. So I feel like he would understand the importance of having a real shark, as opposed to, a CGI shark. And also just, that little bit of suspense where you don't see the, you don't see the shark. And I think that he could effectively do that. And yes, it would probably be hard to get him to not make changes to the script. But as mentioned, they probably all would want to. And I think that for him, he could get across the drama the suspense, the action, and just the creature part of it. Because that's another thing. Joss Whedon has worked with creatures and, monsters and that kind of thing. So he could understand that dynamic and the animal-human interaction. And I really think that he would be a good fit for this.
Alrighty, and George, who's your choice?
All right, so the director I chose is Fede Alvarez. If you're not familiar with him, he did the Evil Dead remake. He also did a great movie called Don't Breathe. And I think part of the reason I wanted to pick him is because he's shown that he can do remakes well, he can do horror well, and he's kind of a newish director, kind of like Spielberg was. I think it would be cool to kind of give him a chance to remake this iconic movie. Because he showed with Evil Dead that he was able to make it his own without like taking away from the original. And like we said, if we're using the same script from Jaws, I feel like he could take this script and use the same script but still make a completely different movie because it's him directing it. He could put his sense of tone, and he would direct it in a very different way than Spielberg. And I think he's shown that he's very good with like using practical effects in Evil Dead and Don't Breathe. Kind of like Chelsea mentioned. A CGI shark would be very different. I think Fede Alvarez could do the practical shark very effectively, and he'd be able to be very respectful to the original without changing the script basically. So that's my pick.
All right, debaters, have it out.
Well, I just want to say for Fede Alvarez, man, I can't do anything to argue against him. I think with I just think with Fede, I think what is his thing. The thing I can say about him is that his movies start off really good. Not to say that his endings are bad, but like they start off really suspenseful and really grounded. And then for some reason in the third act, it kind of shifts away from that tone that they started. It kind of shifts away from being grounded, and it sometimes gets a little carried away with itself. Like for example, with Don't Breathe, the first two acts are pretty suspenseful and are heart pounding, but then when you get into why Slang is after the main girl, it's creepy, but it gets kind of out there, and it gets kind of weird. But that's the most I can say about Fede Alvarez. But to be honest, with Joss Whedon, Joss Whedon, a lot of the times can be a really good filmmaker. My problem with Joss Whedon is that with something like Jaws, he's a little bit too lighthearted for the project. I gotta be honest with you. Even when you look at something like, with Firefly, and in Buffy, they have darker tones in them, but for the most part, they're pretty lighthearted. Jaws is not that lighthearted. Yeah, they crack some one-liners. Yeah, they might say there's some humor sprinkled in there, but for the most part, Jaws is mostly suspense. I don't think Joss Whedon can do suspense. And with something like, even with the first Avengers, if you look back on it, it's still an enjoyable movie. I still really love watching it, the original Avengers movie. It's just when I know it's maybe the cinematography mainly has to do with this, but look at the lighting of that movie. It is too bright of a movie. The colors are popping out way too much. It doesn't actually feel like a cinematic movie. It feels like a long TV episode, the original Avengers. Whereas, of course, Age of Ultron looked more cinematic, but I think that had less to do with Joss Whedon and more to do with what what Kevin Feige and Marvel wants the vision of the movie to look like, and there were tensions between Marvel and Joss Whedon in Age of Ultron as reported, and do we need to go into Justice League? I know Joss Whedon was in a bit of a tight spot with Justice League. He had to take over Zack Snyder, and he had to reshoot almost like 90% of that movie, but it completely shifted the tone of what Justice League was originally supposed to be. And Justice League, the movie turned out to be a half decent version of the cartoon series, and it felt more cartoony than the actual Justice League animated series. It took itself way less seriously than the cartoon did, and I don't really want that with Joss. And of course, I know I got to bring up the elephant in the room. Joss Whedon is a little bit of a problematic director nowadays with some of the controversies around him, especially like what Ray Fisher, who plays Cyborg, is coming out on Twitter saying stuff like he's not like a really respected director to work with nowadays. So I don't know how that would work, especially with people who are so outspoken. Like Michael Keaton is very outspoken on his social media and stuff like that. And what would their relationship be like? And with especially, and of course, Tom Boyega, like so I don't know how's that going to work out. But that's all I have to say right now. Point.
For me, for the other two directors, Alvarez, some of the movies that I saw mentioned here in the comments as we were going along made me think, oh yeah, Curtis is right. His movies have a tendency to be good, and then once you get to the suspenseful part, you're like, wait, what? This is what? High Tension is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. I saw it with a friend, and I remember at the end of it, we were so confused. And I know that's writing too. But I can't help but think of that. And also, yeah, Don't Breathe. I loved Don't Breathe, and then it got weird. And it was like, wait, what? What's happening? And whereas Jaws has that all of a sudden turn. It's not a twist, but it is, it goes from this movie, and then all of a sudden, when you get the shark at the end, I worry about that. I worry that would it turn weird for some reason with him directing? The thing with your director, Curtis, is that those movies, to me, yeah, there's suspense. I actually didn't watch past that scene with the baby in The Witch because, as I mentioned before, I don't like seeing children murdered in movies, and that was very disturbing for me. I looked it up on Wikipedia instead of watching it. But yeah, I did see The Lighthouse, and with both of those movies, while yes, there is suspense, I feel that there is a fine line between suspense and boredom. And I really don't, I just worry that he would draw out the suspense in Jaws too much, and that it would, because, even Jaws, there's a fine line there, where is this actually a movie about a shark, or are we just going to keep talking? And it is good because of the actors and because of the dialogue and because of the way it's shot and the suspense in it. And I worry that he would just, it would come across as boring. Joss Whedon, he's very much, like you said, out there, but he also can do dark. Like it is much the cinematographer's decision to make it bright. And Jaws it's not a Tim Burton film, it's not super dark, but it's also not super bright and happy like Wonder Woman 84 or something, but I think that he could do that. Just from all the other things that he's done. Like you said, even with Justice League, and then with Buffy and with Firefly, those aren't super bright, and I think that he could pull off that, suspense, the working with the effects, and just having that good in-between vibe of not being overly slow, but not being overly intense or getting weird at the end. And yeah, so that's my argument.
Yeah, so like kind of like Chelsea said, I haven't seen The Lighthouse. I saw The Witch, and I like The Witch, but I do think that while he's able to definitely have tension in his movies, I think kind of like she said, I wouldn't necessarily say he would make Jaws boring, but I do think that maybe his type of horror isn't quite what Jaws is. Like, he would be good with the tension part, but the actual exciting part, I'm not sure if you could do that or would want to do that. It seems like he's not really interested in making kind of big mainstream movies. I'm not sure what his next movie is. Maybe he is selling out already. But kind of on the other end of that, I feel like Joss Whedon has, had a long career, and I don't know if he'd want to remake Jaws. And I kind of forgot that he has done more horror than I thought, like Buffy and Cabin in the Woods. I'm not sure if you guys mentioned, but I just feel like that his sensibilities might be a little too, like, comedic for this. Like, when I picked Fede Alvarez, I was thinking that maybe it would be a little more, not necessarily comedic, but maybe a little more like over the top, almost like an R-rated Jaws. But I still think that he could rein it in and still do his thing without making it too, like, gory. Right, Drew Goddard, yeah. But yeah, I just don't know if Joss Whedon would fit in that way. So I feel like Joss Whedon's kind of too mainstream and too, I don't know if he'd want to do a remake of Jaws. And I feel like Robert Eggers wouldn't be interested in doing it, even if they offered it to him.
Aren't we going though we're going with the universe where it's not a remake?
Yeah,
This is a new movie.
This is
right.
Jaws, a completely new movie that never existed. Yeah, and what how Jaws came about, it was supposed to be just cheesy B independent movie, and it was today. I don't think someone like Universal, because Universal, they're more into mainstream blockbusters nowadays. This is not like the 70s where like it was just like the human age of filmmakers. I think like today, someone like an A24 would have made Jaws, and Robert Eggers now has a fantastic relationship with A24. So I think Jaws, I've come back to Jaws is one of the what makes that movie work is the suspense of it, and Robert Eggers knows how to build suspense, and if he's using the same script. Again, he's not going to change anything to it. He's going to add his little flavor to it. So it would the script of Jaws. There's slow burns in some areas, but there's a lot of scenes where you're still engaged, even if nothing's horrifying, nothing's scary going on. Again, in that scene in the boat, and when they're below deck and they're talking about the Indianapolis ship and they're getting drunk and they're singing, that's a very entertaining scene because you learn more about the characters, not much about the shark during that scene. It adds character development, and with Nicolas Cage, when he's going to deliver that Indianapolis monologue, or since we're updating it, it might be about a different war, whatever it is. Robert Eggers knows how to hold a camera on one character as you're delivering a monologue. When you watch The Witch, the exorcism scene with the little boy. Is a fantastic monologue that boy is giving. It's a fantastic scene. It's heartbreaking. It's gut wrenching. It's raw, and you clench your seat handles when you're watching the film. And with The Lighthouse, when Willem Dafoe is doing that horror scene, and he's praying to the sea gods to lay wrath on Robert Pattinson. That's an engaging, terrifying scene, and I think Robert Eggers would do the same when Nicolas Cage is delivering that little monologue about his experiences. And Robert Eggers knows how to do jump scares pretty well too, because this is The Witch has a couple of jump scares that work effectively, and you wouldn't think they would be designed as jump scares. The scene at the end where Anya Taylor-Joy is in the barn talking to Black Phillip, and he's just a goat. He's just a goat. You think the goat can't do anything. Anya Taylor-Joy is talking to Go. It's like, I'll be your servant. I'll be your servant from this day forth, or whatever, or English is speaking. and then like a beat, and then you don't see anyone. You just hear someone say, what does thou crave? And my bone just shivers. And when I saw that, I was shook. I was like, it's getting real. And I think with the reveal of the shark, Robert Eggers knows how to do that. Even if it's just simply revealing a shark, again with that scene, The Witch, is just a creepy, dark voice saying something off screen. You don't see it, the person, you don't see them, but you're thinking it's coming from the goat. But like, this goat saying that, this is terrifying. And again, with how mysterious the shark is, Robert Eggers could add a lot of flavor to that.
Right. Well, folks, that was a spectacular final round for Jaws. I'm going to take a little bit more time to continue collecting my thoughts on who I think for this one, so I will instead pass it off to Danny. Why don't you give us your thoughts first?
I'll admit I am not very familiar with your pick, George, because I haven't seen Don't Breathe and the Evil Dead remake and the Hills Have Eyes remake and High Tension.
Yeah, some of those are a different guy, Alexander Aja.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. I was
He did like
confused.
Piranha and Crawl and Hills Have Eyes and High Tension. But yeah, Fede is Evil Dead and Don't Breathe.
So I'm not familiar with those, but you made a really compelling argument. I almost went with it, or I was considering it. And I think Joss is just too much of a TV guy and too set in his ways. And like, truth be told, I haven't loved any of the movies he's directed, the ones I've seen, like for his direction. So I gotta go with our boy Robert Eggers. Yeah, he's just clearly someone who takes time and thinks about horror a lot and thinks about how to scare people. And I think that would be fascinating. And I think he's the guy who's like young in his career and I think would be in a good place to like give him this script and just be like, all right, what are you going to do with this more mainstream thing? And just see how he handles it. So.
All right. Jess, how about you?
I mean, this one was hard. I know that Eggers is a great director. I don't know, because it's hard to tell, because even in a world where this movie's never made, like, let's say that history still plays itself out and it is a huge blockbuster. From things that I've seen from him, I haven't really seen him on the blockbuster side of things. Like, he does a little bit more of the like critically acclaimed, like stuff that you expect to see at the Oscars or stuff that gets people talking because of just how the story is told. And he does do beautiful shots, but it's hard to see him doing a project like this from my perspective. But I think Curtis also made a great point that I think that at this point in time in 2020, Joss Whedon is a little bit problematic. So I could find it hard to see a studio giving him control over a movie like this, because I have a feeling he might have trouble getting work for a little bit just with stuff that's coming out. So I'm going to go with George's pick because I think that he will be able to bring forth the tension, the suspense that we need from a creature feature.
All right. Erik, what do you think?
Oh, this was tough. All three directors, they all have different work. I love all their work. I've started The Lighthouse. I haven't finished it. I guess I was already disturbed, or maybe I thought about The Witch because that was one of the most disturbing movies I've ever seen. My thing with Robert Eggers, he's what I've seen. He's a brilliant, brilliant director. It's just, I feel like with his last two films that were a big deal with The Lighthouse and The Witch, he had so much creative control. And then he would have to, and he was in charge. No, we're trying to avoid it. He wasn't involved with the script. Like this isn't going to be one of the scripts. But I feel like he would go to a studio, and I don't know how much they would let him get away with. I don't know how much he would be able to do, and I feel like that could create a lot of creative differences. I think he would do a great job, definitely creating the tension and definitely the horror. But I don't know how he would respond to going to a studio with a mainstream movie. But we'll see. Joss Whedon, Jess said it perfectly. You might have some problem getting work for a little while, but also even before this came out, he hasn't really directed a movie in a couple of years. And I don't know. I think he'd make it a little too funny. I don't know, but yeah, Buffy was a while ago, and also he did a great job with the Serenity based off Firefly. That definitely had some intense moments, but when it comes to like the real horror and like the point of view of the shark, I don't know if he'd do a great job with that. But once I read George, your directing choice, I immediately thought of Evil Dead. I immediately thought of Don't Breathe, and he's worked with studios. Mr. Alvarez, Fede Alvarez, I hope that's how you say his name. What?
Fede, I think it's
Fede Alvarez.
It's short for Federico, I guess. So yeah, Fede.
Got a really cool name. But I would choose him because of how he handled the Evil Dead. And that's a lot of pressure to be on somebody. But then he went and did an original movie with Don't Breathe. And yeah, it had a really weird ending, but he directed it so well. And I think that is where I think he'd do a wonderful job, especially with how dark that house was. I think he'd do a really good job creating the dark ocean. And definitely giving us some different point of views with like when the kids are pretending to be the shark and then with the real shark. You can definitely tell the difference between those perspectives. And I think he'd do a great job underwater and directing the actors. Because a lot of the two films he did, he had some great actors and he got great performances out of them. But he's not going to have to worry about dealing with any continuing like Elizabeth Salander story like he did with Girl with the Spider Web. He's doing an original script called Jaws. And I think he'd have a lot more fun with the shark and also getting the practical effects in. And if he has to use CGI, so be it. I'd love to see how he did it, but I think he'd try to take the more practical route like the original film, if it existed. But I think he'd make it really scary and do a really good job with it and work with the studio well. So I got to go with Mr. Alvarez.
All right. Well, as it comes down, I think y'all made really, really good arguments across the board. Curtis, I thoroughly enjoyed your argument with Eggers about how even a scene as simple as playing peekaboo with a baby brother can be one of the tensest scenes in the movie because you know something's off and you know something's weird, and it feels very reminiscent of when Brodie is watching the kid trying to stay above water and is it a shark? Is he just drowning? So I think it's very reminiscent of that, and I do think he would certainly bring a distinct cinematic style to it. I mean, let's be real. He'd probably shoot the whole thing on Super 8 just because he could, but it would work with the style because that's what Eggers has done with a lot of his previous movies. They might have the eccentric style, but it fits the overall movie, so it'd be interesting. With Joss, I kind of got to mirror some of the other points that were made. I think that while he is a good director, his stuff is more lighthearted. It's more sci-fi. Like the only quote unquote real world thing that I can think of he's directed is an adaptation of Much Ado About Nothing, which was just kind of like, and I realize it was his palate cleanser after something like Avengers, but he's great with actors, yes, but I do think as an overall director, he's a little bit too lighthearted for what something like Jaws would need to be. And George, I really liked your argument with Fede about how he can take something that like just something like Evil Dead that has just everyone knows it. It's at its bones a very simple concept, and he can take it and kind of form his own thing and make it this new unique story that you wouldn't have thought before. I mean, he did the same thing with Don't Breathe. We think it's a standard home invasion thing, but then you tweak it and you add the blindness aspect, and he finds ways to kind of weave a cooler, deeper narrative into what he has. Honestly, what really came down to it for me was I started thinking about these different directors with the cast that was being built. And the director that I saw like handling the ensemble and the whole mix of everybody the best was Fede. Over the course of his movies, he has done quite a bit more with bigger ensembles, with kind of keeping that dramatic tension and all the interpersonal relationships really, really well. So yeah, at the end, I think I had to give my vote to George for Fede Alvarez, which means that Fede is the official choice for director for Jaws 2020, which means we now have a completed cast and director for this feature.
All right. So does that let's list off the cast and director we got here for Jaws. As Ellen Brody, we got Vanessa Hudgens, casted by myself. Mayor Vaughn, John Carroll Lynch, casted by Chelsea Hooper. John Boyega, casted by me. Quint, Nicolas Cage, casted by George. Brodie, Carla Gugino, casted by again George, and director Eddie Alvarez, chosen by George. So yeah, this is a pretty impressive list we got here. So George, would she be called Martin, or what's her female name?
I was gonna say it would be Martine or something, but Marty would be more appropriate, probably. Yeah.
Marty. Okay.
Marty Brody. I don't know.
Yeah.
Martina.
Martina, maybe. Yeah.
Marta.
Martina by the marina.
Yeah. So, yeah. That's it. That's our list. That's our cast. So pretty impressive cast, everyone. Thank you all for watching this episode of Past the Future. Join us next week. Episode 6. We'll be covering a classic noir. We'll be covering Sunset Boulevard. That should be really cool. So check us out, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.